Chapter 1195. You usually don't come here. Batman stood behind Constantine and said, "You're the kind of person who wants to solve everything by yourself. That's the damn pride of you mages. If you're here, it means that you have a plan and want to use us. Tell me, what do you want?" Constantine raised his hand and said, "Don't say that. We act on our own because we think we can solve the problem. When we're powerless, mages know how to unite their friends," Constantine said as he lit a cigarette. But what he was actually thinking was, "You guessed right." Constantine knew that no matter what he wanted to do, he wouldn't be able to gain the trust of this transvestite in front of him. Fortunately, he didn't need to gain Batman's trust. In fact, it was more advantageous for Batman to suspect him. "What happened?" Batman asked. Constantine exhaled a smoke ring and sighed. "I discovered the origin of magic." Constantine believed that the news of discovering the origin of magic would make Batman nervous for a while. It was a secret that everyone knew. Batman didn't trust anyone, much less those mysterious mages. Constantine knew that Batman had wanted to control the world of magic for a long time. To that end, he even agreed to establish the Justice League of Darkness as a fulcrum for the Justice League to expand its influence in the world of magic. Unfortunately, the Justice League of Darkness itself wasn't reliable. Who were its members? Dead people, worshippers of a certain Indian god. A villain who created a strange serum for himself and wanted to become Batman, only to be controlled by the serum. Zatanna. She was the only reliable one, and the hand that the Justice League of Darkness extended into the world of magic. The swamp monster, the agent of the green of all things, the protector of the environment. There was also the Madam of Xanadu, the mysterious witch. The common characteristic of these people was that they were rarely seen together, let alone united. Of course, there was Constantine himself. Batman looked at Constantine's handsome face that looked serious but was actually frivolous. This was one of the few people he couldn't see through, and he was someone who gave him a headache. If Constantine hadn't always acted like a hero, Batman would have kicked him out. The origin of magic. This topic indeed piqued Batman's interest. After the origin of lightning speed and the origin of the emotional spectrum, was the origin of magic finally beginning to unveil? Batman thought to himself, "I hope it's not what I think it is." Magic was created by man. The one who created it is related to the prophet. Constantine observed Batman's expression. But Batman wouldn't reveal any flaws so easily. He didn't show it on the surface, but he sighed inwardly. As expected, seraphic speed, emotional spectrum, and then magic. What was the prophet trying to do by creating these special powers? If the bloodline of the powerful warrior in The Origins was really related to Krypton, then even Superman's power was created by the prophet. What were they trying to do? Could it be related to the world that was destroyed the last time? Batman has learned something about the Marvel world from Little Spider. He had a guess. In the final battle, Professor Stark and Superman Rogers had displayed powers similar to some people in this universe. Logically speaking, Superman was not Steve Rogers, and Dr. Manhattan should not be related to Dr. Stark. However, when Batman thought of the big X that destroyed the Seven Lanterns, he instinctively felt it. That might be the Tony Stark of the previous world. The clues of the previous world were left in this world. What was the prophet trying to do? Batman felt more and more that the waters of the Three Prophets system were really deep. At this moment, Constantine suddenly asked, "Is Zack with you?" He raised his head and looked at the watchtower above his head. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and his eyes looked worried. But no one knew if it was his acting. In any case, Batman felt that Constantine wasn't simply worried about Zatanna. She went to help Diana. Batman replied, "Are you coming to the watchtower to wait for her?" "Okay." Constantine didn't refuse at all. He put out the cigarette in his hand and said, "I've been worried about her ever since the Church of Cold Flames chased us and was forced to separate from her. That thing is with you? Batman looked at him with an extremely oppressive gaze. But this was useless against Jia Kong. Jia Kong smiled cheekily and said, "It's better for me to hold such a dangerous magic tool. Bat, you know that my hands are magical." It was rare for Batman to not insist on his own opinion and let Jia Kong continue holding the eye of Agamotto. He knew that Jia Kong was right. The Justice Alliance was powerful and the heroes were united. Everything was good except that they were a little insensitive to magic. If anything happened to the magic tool, they really couldn't do anything about it. Even if Zatanna held it, it wasn't safe. Who knew how many people in the magic world coveted this thing? The last time Constantine and Zatanna held this thing together, they were almost chased into a dead end. If not for that, he wouldn't have forced Zatanna to leave. Even so, he still caused the death of a friend. He had no choice but to project his soul astral body over and contact Strange before he figured out who this thing was connected to. He borrowed the power of a dimensional lord to counterattack. Batman left the room with Constantine. They needed to leave the public area through a secret door and arrive at the part of the Hall of Justice hidden under the surface of the water, the part where the Justice Alliance's command hall and activity area was located. The secret door was hidden under a fountain with strange sculptures. The strangest thing was, how did the heroes bypass the tourists and enter the secret door? They just had to open the fountain. Under the cover of the fountain, Batman opened the secret door. The secret door was a high-tech door supported by steel bones and a magic door that Diana asked her brother, Vulcan, to create. Constantine studied the magic door excitedly, but in the end, he had to admit that he couldn't enter the door without the password. But this didn't mean that he couldn't sneak into the Hall of Justice. After all, a real mage could always find loopholes, and mages would never crack a door honestly. They could go anywhere and bypass the defense. In conclusion, this door could stop a gentleman, but not Constantine. After entering the Watchtower base, there weren't many heroes still in the hall. Barry greeted Constantine. "It's rare to see you here, John. Are you looking for Xiao Jia? She's furious with you. The last time you chased her back, she scolded Diana for the whole night. Her eyes were still red the next day." Constantine said, "Find me a room. Is there a guest room here? Or let me stay in Xiao Jia's room." Barry shook his head. "No. She'll come back and give you a curse, and then give me another one. She's really furious. Think of a way to explain it." Constantine could only stay in the house that Luther used to live in. Frankly speaking, it was a nice house. Luther had spent a lot of money to renovate it. He strolled to the dining hall of the Watchtower. When it was time to eat, there were many people in the dining hall. Due to the recent tense situation, many heroes had returned to the Watchtower base, including Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Neptune, Batman, Firestorm, Atom, and so on. Only Diana had taken Zatanna to investigate something, and Superman had gone to deal with some matters. The others were basically there. Eagle Man warned Constantine, "Smoking is prohibited here." "Is that so?" Jia Kong had to put down the sika in his hand and lowered his eyebrows. "I really don't fit in here. There's no one to talk to. Let me think. I seem to be more familiar with Shazan." "Where's Shazan?" "He's in his room," Condor said. "He likes to eat some sweet things, donuts, candy, and so on, but Diana and Batman sometimes say that he's like that, so he brought them to his room to eat secretly. This is actually not a good thing for him." I can understand Diana and Batman's thoughts. Shazan, he's not very mature. Although Captain Shazan looked tall and steady, everyone in the Justice Alliance knew that he was actually still a child. So, they would sometimes take care of him. Children always have a rebellious phase, and Shazan could not completely treat him as a child. That would damage his authority. Shazan did not want to be the little brother of the Justice Alliance. He did not want to be like Little Spider. So, he would return to his room to do things that would damage his image secretly. Constantine smiled and ordered a glass of whiskey, then another, until the chef warned him that he was already a little drunk. Constantine could only stagger back to his room. The next day, he was woken up by the alarm. Constantine rubbed his eyes and walked out of his room. He saw that all the heroes had come out and the atmosphere was not right. Batman's face was so dark that it could drip water. Eaglewoman turned her head and leaned on Hawkman's shoulder, whimpering softly. As for Hawkman, he clenched his fists and his eyes were burning. Barry gripped his hands tightly and his eyes turned red. Wonder Woman hurried over with Zatanna. They had just returned when they saw a group of people surrounding the door of Shazam's room. Diana pushed them away and walked forward. In the room filled with childlike charm, Captain Shazam was lying on the floor. A wound had entered his back and he was no longer breathing. Diana was extremely furious. She restrained herself with 120% of her self-control and did not roar out. Constantine also walked forward. When he saw Shazam's corpse, his face instantly turned pale. Anyone could see that Shazam was killed without any preparation. Shazam's room was like a child's style, so he usually did not invite anyone in. Only those whom he trusted very much could enter his room. In the Justice Alliance's base, who could kill him without alerting anyone? Not everyone was Batman, but anyone could easily guess that the person who killed Shazam must be someone he trusted very much. Moreover, the murderer was in the Watchtower base. Constantine knew that he was in big trouble. Chapter 1196. Diana walked forward and flipped over Shazam's body. She gently closed his eyes, which were filled with confusion. Shazam's original body was actually a 16-year-old boy. He was even a little thin and weak. Under normal circumstances, he would not maintain his Shazam form when he was about to sleep. After all, maintaining his transformation required a lot of energy. However, Shazam's body was his appearance after transformation, a tall and muscular adult. He was still wearing the red uniform with the yellow lightning bolt pattern on the chest and the magic hood. However, the white lightning surrounding him had been extinguished forever. Even the pair of eyes that could burst out lightning were only left with the gray color of death. Shazam must have been killed when he was meeting someone, Diana said angrily. When he hides in his room alone, he will change back to his original appearance. Diana. Batman stopped Diana from continuing. If she continued to speculate, she would come to an awkward conclusion. The murderer was among them, and this was what the murderer wanted to achieve. Batman said in a low voice, "No matter how angry we are now, we cannot fall into the trap that the murderer has set for us. Why did he choose to commit the murder at the base of the Justice and Order Alliance? It's to destroy the trust between us," King Arthur said. However, when he raised his head, he saw many people looking at him in surprise. Arthur frowned and said, "What? Can't I use my brain?" Diana had also calmed down. She said to the Sea King, "I thought you would be the most impulsive and angry one among us." "I'm very angry," the Sea King said coldly. "I want to break the bones of the beast. Shazam's death is unusual." "Oh!" Batman was really surprised this time. The Sea King had always been the one who did not like to use his brain. Arthur was a reckless man. He could kill people easily, but if he was asked to make a plan, God, how many times had Arthur's plan been ruined by Melah's recklessness? "The person who killed him is provoking us. Not only does he want to get rid of us, but he also wants to defeat us," Arthur said calmly. Batman quickly figured it out. The Justice League had faced countless enemies, but under normal circumstances, an enemy hiding in the dark would either kill Batman, Superman, or the Flash first. Especially the Flash. Usually, when a powerful enemy appeared, they would get rid of the Flash first. Because seraphic speed was too overpowered. Taking advantage of the opportunity to get rid of the Flash was equivalent to moving the most troublesome general of the Justice League. Similarly, it was the same for Batman and Superman. Killing Batman was equivalent to destroying the brain of the Justice League. Killing Superman was equivalent to destroying the soul and the most powerful combat power of the Justice League. Killing the Flash was equivalent to eradicating the biggest surprise of the Justice League. Some people liked to challenge the brains of the Justice League, while others liked to directly defeat the strongest Superman of the Justice League. They all wanted to prove their intelligence and strength, but they did not like accidents that ruined their plans. Therefore, the Flash was always the first to die. But this time was different. They chose to kill Shazam first, and they did it in the headquarters of the Justice League. Although Shazam was a very active and powerful hero, he did not pose much of a threat to the enemy. This was because he was not mature enough, and it was easy for him to fall into the enemy's trap. It was not difficult for the few leaders of the Justice League to kill Shazam. Therefore, almost no one would choose to get rid of Shazam first. When an enemy hiding in the dark attacked for the first time, they would usually choose the target that posed the greatest threat to them, unless they liked to fight, like the Joker liked to play with Batman. He killed Shazam in the Watchtower to destroy the trust between us and cause a crisis of trust in the Justice League. At the same time, he showed his confidence and announced that he would directly defeat the Justice League. At the same time, he wanted to provoke us to the greatest extent, because Shazam is the target of our protection. Batman had calmed down, but his tone was still cold. In the eyes of the Justice League's heroes, Shazam was generally regarded as a Boy Scout. He was a little rebellious and childish, but he had the purest heart in the Justice League, and was the target of everyone's protection. The enemy's cruel killing of the underage Shazam had angered everyone in the Justice League. Batman took a closer look at the wound that took Shazam's life. It was a ruthless and accurate strike that pierced through Shazam's heart from the back. The wound was caused by a sharp weapon. The weapon was a narrow dagger. The wound was 3 inches long, and it was very close to the body. This meant that Shazam was killed by a sharp dagger from the back. Shazam's body did not return to its original state after his death, Batman said after examining the wound. There might be magic involved. Shazam was killed by a magic dagger? Zatanna frowned. She turned around and asked Constantine, who had been distracted ever since he found Shazam's body, "Do you remember such a magical artifact?" Constantine came back to his senses and said in a panic, "I don't remember it, but we still don't know what magic is attached to the dagger, so let everyone return to their rooms," Batman ordered. "There are too many people here. It won't help the investigation." Diana ordered directly, "Everyone return to their rooms. The rest of the investigation will be handled by Batman and me. We also need a magical assistant. Zack, you should come down and help as well. And you, Barry, we might need you." Zatanna was just about to say that Constantine could help, but Zack Kong left first. Before he left, he said to Zatanna, "Don't be silly, Zack. They don't trust me." Constantine reached out to tidy Zatanna's hair. Then, without looking back, he put on his yellow windbreaker and walked back to his room. Zatanna stared at his back. Her woman's intuition told her that the man she loved deeply had something on his mind. After everyone had left, Diana said, "No matter who killed Shazam, Wizard Shazam will definitely know. We just need to ask Wizard Shazam." Wizard Shazam was an ancient wizard. He had participated in the creation of the Eternal Council, a wizard organization whose main purpose was to protect mankind. The Eternal Council was formed by the 7 wizards with the highest level of magic in human history. They had participated in many major events, including the trial of the 3 original sins, Pandora, Judas, and the Interrogator. Wizard Shazam had spent 3,000 years protecting mankind. Later, he grew tired of it and chose a righteous, pure, and kind 15-year-old boy, Billy Batson, as the guardian of mankind. He was given the ability to use the power of the 6 gods just by saying Shazam. Now that Captain Shazam was killed, the others did not see the murderer, but Wizard Shazam, who was one with Captain Shazam, must know something. We can only contact Wizard Shazan if we return to the Rock of Eternity, Batman said. But Captain Shazan is dead. Who can find the Rock of Eternity? The Rock of Eternity is the center of the universe. Batman also had a headache. How could they go to the Rock of Eternity with Shazan dead? Zatanna's eyes lit up when she heard this. Find a place, or find a person, it was just to find something. Who could be better than Constantine? He was a man who could go to heaven, enter hell's phantom zone, enter heavenly realm, enter dream realm, go to spirit-thin purgatory, and tread hell. I can get Constantine to go. He should be able to find that place. Zatanna said. No. Batman and Wonder Woman said in unison. They looked at each other and let Batman explain. Batman had no intention of hiding it at all. Constantine is still our suspect. We can't let the suspect look for clues. At this time, Wonder Woman made a discovery. She found a small doll that looked like a Barbie doll on Shazan's bedside. Shazan did not look like the kind of little boy who would play with a Barbie doll. Moreover, the doll's shape was really suspicious. It was a strange little person with a button for eyes sewn with cloth. Wonder Woman raised the doll and said, "Do any of you recognize this thing? Let me see." Zatanna took the doll, and a trace of panic flashed across her face. This did not escape Batman's eyes. Zatanna said in a low voice, "This is a magic tool, a voodoo doll. This is a magic tool used to steal things from others. Wizards usually use this thing to steal people's lifespan, love, happiness, honor, and power." Batman interrupted Zatanna and said, "This thing can also steal Shazan's power. Can you tell who gave this to Shazan?" Wonder Woman's expression turned serious. Clearly, they all had their own guesses, but what made Zatanna panic was that their guesses might be true. This was because this voodoo doll was a secret technique of the voodoo sect. There weren't many people who could make it, and Constantine happened to know one who often stole from him. Daddy Midnight. But Daddy Midnight was already dead. In order to protect the Eye of Agamotto, he was surrounded by several great mages of the Church of Cold Flames. He killed Mr. E, but he also died in the hands of others. Zatanna did not even know why Daddy Midnight would give up his life for Constantine. They were not good friends. However, after Daddy Midnight died, if there was any inheritance, it could only fall into Constantine's hands. Zatanna subconsciously hid her own guess, but she still revealed the clues. This kind of magical tool requires a considerable level of magical attainment. Furthermore, only the voodoo sect's mages are skilled in this style of voodoo doll. It must have come from the hands of a very powerful voodoo sect mage. Zatanna suddenly looked flustered. She ran her fingers through her hair to avoid Batman's gaze. She said in a low voice, "I still have to check the magic books. I have to go back." Zatanna found an excuse to leave. Wonder Woman held the doll and said to Batman, "You actually didn't expose her. That's rare. Because Constantine shouldn't be the murderer. This is just something to divert our attention. Of course, we can't ignore the investigation of him. I'll keep an eye on him," Batman said. "Zatanna will ask him. It's better than me asking." Chapter 1197. Batman was deep in thought. He was thinking, why Shazan? After knowing why he was confused, Diana said in a low voice, "Didn't Arthur say that the murderer was trying to provoke us? That's why he killed the innocent Shazan first to destroy the trust between us? Arthur is starting to use his brain. That's a good thing. It means that he's starting to take responsibility and become a real king," Batman said. "But he doesn't have that much experience. His brain needs some time to work before it can take on the heavy responsibility of thinking." Diana smiled and hammered his shoulder. "Don't let Arthur hear this, or he'll beat you up." Her smile only appeared for a moment before it immediately turned gloomy. "I know you're trying to comfort me, but I really don't need it. Anger and sadness are a good thing for me now. It gives me enough motivation to take revenge and fight. Shazan was like a younger brother to me. There are no men in the Amazon islands. You know that Amazon men have a terrible history for us. It was Superman who showed me the seriousness of men. You showed me the determination of men. Barry taught me that men can be kind, and Billy, he was innocent and not evil at all. You're like family to me. My family was hurt. We need to take revenge for them. But revenge can't make you lose your rationality and thinking, Batman said. Billy's death left you at a loss. Otherwise, you wouldn't have thought of something that even Arthur could think of, and you wouldn't have overlooked something that Arthur didn't think of. Diana said angrily, Great. So that's how you see me. Am I not even as good as Arthur? Tell me, what did I overlook? Timing. Batman said. Why did Shazam die today? Batman said. Is there anything unusual today? Diana thought for a moment and said, Today is the first time Constantine has stepped into the Hall of Justice. When I first saw him, I knew that he came to the Watchtower with an ulterior motive, Batman said. If it weren't for another reason, John would never have stepped into this place. This place is like another world to him, and it will make him very uncomfortable. You think it was John? No. You mean you don't think he did it? Diana calmed down a little. At least she could think normally. Batman continued his analysis. When Constantine came to the Hall of Justice for the first time, he had his own purpose. He had a plan. We found his voodoo doll in Shazam's place. Does this mean that this plan is related to Shazam? He knew that Shazam was the key, and then the enemy found out that he knew that Shazam was the key. So I made the first move and killed him. Diana's gaze turned serious. Constantine knows the murderer's motive, so you let Zatanna test him. You think that the voodoo doll is related to Shazam's death, but it's not the decisive factor. Instead, it's a clue to the motive. If there's anyone who can make Constantine reveal his plans, it's Zatanna. Batman said calmly, John is a determined man. He treats every one of his friends sincerely, but he can watch them die for justice. Whether his friends are willing or not, he feels guilty about it, but he never regrets it. He carries out a kind of dark justice. I wonder if Zatanna is an exception to him. Probably not. Diana joked. I don't know if he will sacrifice Xiao Jia, but I believe that when the time comes, he will sacrifice Xiao Jia's father without hesitation, even if his father is more important than anything else in Xiao Jia's heart. The true father-in-law killer Constantine. Zatanna arrived at Constantine's room and pushed the door open without hesitation. Constantine said nervously in the bathroom, Who is it? Damn it, Xiao Jia. It's not convenient now. Zatanna kicked open the toilet door to Constantine's room. Constantine was squatting on the toilet bowl, clutching the toilet paper with a panicked expression. However, Zatanna was unmoved. She calmly touched Constantine's body. Constantine said in horror, Little Zatanna, don't do it here. Zatanna grabbed the eye of Agamotto hanging on Constantine's chest and tore it off. Jia Kong was almost suffocated. Zatanna did not shy away from Constantine, who was squatting on the toilet bowl. She whispered, Mana probe. Traces of magic clearly appeared on the eye of Agamotto. Light blue fluorescence appeared on the bronze eye-shaped pendant. The traces where the eyeball locked the time gem was the most obvious. The light blue traces of magic slowly faded. This showed that Constantine had been using the eye of Agamotto just now. You're telling me you can't undo the protection curse on this thing? Zatanna said angrily. So you're using it to wipe your ass? Alright. Xiao Jia, you found out. Constantine said with a dejected expression, I just found out. This thing can see images of the past. I swear, I didn't expect the room they arranged for me to also be used by the clown girl Haley. I definitely didn't mean to watch her bathe. It was just a coincidence. Zatanna released her fist that was hammering Zakon's abdomen. She was about to continue interrogating him when Constantine used an extremely vicious and suicidal move. With a puff, he spat out sh*t. Really beat the sh*t out of him. Zatanna had a look of disgust as she hurriedly retreated out of the toilet. She slammed the door and shouted, "Don't think you can fool us like this! I was just hovering at the edge. Xiao Jia, I couldn't hold back your punch." Zatanna's weak voice came from behind the door. Zatanna did not believe him. She knew that Constantine was trying to destroy the evidence. He was indeed doing something shady in the toilet. Zatanna's intrusion had caught him off guard, and he had no choice but to use this method to buy time to destroy the evidence. But even if she knew, Zatanna could not harden her heart to go in and catch him. It was obvious that Constantine also knew. With the sound of flushing water, Constantine, who had cleaned up all traces, walked out of the toilet with a relaxed expression. Zatanna pressed, "What were you doing in there?" "What could I be doing in the toilet?" Constantine's expression was calm, but Strange had already completely cut off the connection between the two sides. Constantine had to find a way to use powerful magic to reopen the passage. Last time, he had sacrificed Father Midnight and a friend as a sacrifice to the heavens to open the passage. Constantine was very sad. He had wasted a good idea. He had originally planned to use this move to stall for time when Strange collected his soul. This magical artifact can see what happened in the past? Zatanna raised the eye of Agamotto and asked. "Don't even think about it. I just tried it. The power in Shazan's room is a mess. The power of magic distorts the scenes of the past." "I can't see anything," Constantine said. Zatanna punched him in the chest again. Zatanna had some psychological trauma and deliberately chose a thicker place. "So you used it to watch Haley bathe?" "I didn't do it on purpose." Constantine had just opened his mouth when he was punched again. "I know you're hiding something from me. You forced me to leave and then open the protection of this thing. You came to the watchtower and claimed to be looking for me, but you left a voodoo doll in Shazan's room," Zatanna said angrily. "The Righteous Alliance has the right to suspect you. Constantine, you should think about how you're going to explain yourself." Jia Kong calmly said, "I can't explain myself. If they want, they can capture me." "So you won't say anything?" Zatanna questioned. "You won't say anything, even to me. The fewer people who know about this, the less danger there will be, whether it's for those who know about it or for the entire world." Constantine looked at Zatanna and said in a low voice, "Promise me, don't ask about this. This is between me and the Righteous Alliance. Don't get involved." "What if I say, I'm a member of the Righteous Alliance?" Zatanna looked into Jia Kang's eyes and enunciated each word. "The last person who knew about this was Father Midnight. You know what happened to him," Constantine said. "I don't want you to be like that." "Finally, one of my questions has been answered," Zatanna said calmly. "Why would Father Midnight risk his life to help you?" "Because you're in cahoots." "What are you doing? Why did you go find Shazan? Why did you leave a voodoo doll that can steal Shazan's power? Why would Father Midnight deal with the Church of Cold Flames for you? What did you do with the Eye of Agamotto? Also, what was it that you didn't want me to know? The evil god in the bathroom?" Zatanna sneered and asked mockingly. In the end, Zatanna was unable to pry open Constantine's mouth. When Jia Kong did what he thought was right, he always pressed forward and never regretted it. Even if he hurt himself or hurt others, he never regretted it. Constantine waited for the people from the Righteous Alliance in his room. He thought that someone would barge in at any moment, Superman or Wonder Woman, and lock him up in the Righteous Alliance's secret prison before interrogating him about Shazan. However, he was already prepared. Shazan was dead. Perhaps this was a good thing, however. To his surprise, Diana pushed open the door to his room and looked around. She did not come to find trouble with him in an aggressive manner. Instead, she told him something that he had not expected. "Zatanna is missing." Constantine's efforts finally failed when he heard this. He raised his hand to light a cigarette, but his trembling hand could not find the lighter for a long time. In the interrogation room of the Righteous Alliance, Only Wonder Woman and Batman sat opposite Constantine. Zatanna left the watchtower after talking to you yesterday. We knew that she wanted to find someone to clear your suspicions, so we did not protect her in time. She must have gone to find Dr. Fate. She felt that God Nabu, who was behind Dr. Fate, should be able to take us to the Rock of Eternity and find Wizard Shazan of the Eternal Council to clear your suspicions. But we received news. She disappeared with Dr. Fate. Her security signal has been deactivated since yesterday. We tried everything we could, but we could not contact her. The Martian hunters could not find her, and neither could Superman. F***CK. Constantine kicked the chair violently and grabbed his hair. F***CKU. F***CK this damned righteous alliance. F***CK you tight-fitting bastards. You should have stopped her from continuing to pester us. This is our business. Why did you drag her into it? But you just want to use everything, use all of my weaknesses. Constantine raised his head angrily and roared, Batman? We all know. Batman looked calmly at the crazy Constantine, but his gaze softened and was no longer filled with suspicion. No one can escape from this vortex, no one. We have no other choice. In this world, there is no Garden of Eden to escape from. Chapter 1198. Look at this world. Our universe is an intricate cage created by three monsters known as the Prophets. They reverse the destruction of the world, creating time, space, and magic. The three prophets protect this universe. Outside the universe is the darkness that once destroyed the world. It is one of the evilest existences, death. I am a prisoner trapped in a cage, using the magic created by the prophets. But now, the conflict between the prophets seems to have caused a crack in the cage. But this is not the light of hope, because outside the cage is the most terrifying darkness that humans can imagine. The prophets created the power of God's speed, the spectrum of emotions, magic, and even the power of life. From the Flash, I learned about the origin of God's speed. A prophet created the God's speed universe. From Batman, I learned about the secret of the spectrum of emotions. The 7 lanterns died at the hands of Dr. Manhattan. Batman even suspected that Dr. Manhattan was once a prophet, or at least one of the leaders of the council. From the swamp monster, I learned that the green of all creation also has an origin. It was created by a mysterious prophet. From Beast, I learned that the red of all creation also has an origin memory. The red of all creation, which represents flesh and blood, and the green of all creation, which represents plants, were both created by the prophets. Without a doubt, the remaining withering ashes, fission bacteria, metal spirit, which represents non-carbon-based life, and the decaying darkness, which represents death, are also related to them. All life in the universe belongs to the 6 great nations, and they were all born from the prophet. I was quite popular in hell, and I found a clue in the soul-thin prison. Heaven and hell were both created by the same prophet. I thought I found the truth, and the truth was that the world is a plaything in the hands of the prophet. But the most mysterious first prophet found me and told me, none of this has anything to do with me. The prophet did not create everything. After I created the universe, I was in a state between existence and non-existence. I was trapped outside the existence of this universe. You think I am the dark hand that controls everything, but in reality, the authority of this world has slipped from my hands since the beginning, and it has left the orbit that I have set for it. The prophet did not create all of this, but the person who created all of this blended into the prophet. When the World Security Council helped me confirm my existence, I broke free from this illusory state and saw this world that I created. I don't know how heaven and hell came to be, because it's not my business. I don't know how your universe's life force was created in the first place. He knows nothing about lightning speed and the emotional spectrum. The first prophet sighed. You think I'm an omnipotent prophet, but in reality, I'm just a prisoner. When I woke up, I should have known everything, because according to the principles of the three-prophet system, I should be omniscient and omnipotent. But when I looked around, there were too many secrets in this universe. Do you know what that means? It means that you didn't create this universe. Constantine's face turned pale with fright. Only now did he realize that this pool of muddy water was bottomless. Even the first prophet couldn't see the bottom. I might just be a lock. The only thing I can do is to open the lock and allow the unspeakable darkness beyond the universe to enter and perish together with the universe. But I can vaguely sense that this is what he wants. The first person to know said, Constantine, his plan is almost complete. It might even be complete. To stop him, we need to be faster. Otherwise, destruction will be our only outcome. Let's do our best while I can still see. The first prophet sighed. I know what the Eye of Agamotto is. A mage lord was trapped outside of time and he was a fuse. When the second prophet created magic, he laid a trap. The 7 great wizards who first mastered magic in this world were the coordinates that opened the door for that mage lord. They're all trapped on the Rock of Eternity, but there's still one person whose power can seep out. You know who he is. Shazan, Constantine said with a solemn expression. This divine artifact is too dangerous. It should be what the second prophet prepared to destroy the world. You must control it in your hands. The first person to know said, Shazan is a ready-made coordinate. His Shazan's power is a power bestowed by the wizards, and his body is a natural magic carrier. Power from higher dimensions can easily be projected into his body. So, when he comes into contact with the Eye of Agamotto, he can easily become the carrier of that dimensional mage lord's power. Constantine said, then, the guy who was banished outside of time can easily return to this universe. So, don't let him touch the Eye of Agamotto. The first prophet's figure gradually became illusory. Otherwise, something terrible will happen. In the future I saw, it will end everything. But this is only the most recent node. After stopping Shazan, we've bought some time. Time to find out the truth. I don't know when it started, but I started to notice the messy heroes in tight clothes in this world. They wander around, flaunt their power, cause trouble everywhere, and abuse the power they can't control. In less than 10 minutes, I'm disgusted with them and the moral superiority they claim to be. Justice, indifferent and sarcastic. Later, my girlfriend also became one of them. Then, when I realized that these people who stood tall would first face the danger of the sky collapsing, when I had no choice but to stand as tall as them, she disappeared. Maybe the pervert who dressed himself as a bat was right. There is no longer a pure land in this world. When the sky collapses, no one can survive. The interrogation room was silent. Batman silently digested the information he got from Constantine. He picked up the voodoo doll and said, So, this is why you came to the Alliance of Justice and Order. Take away Shazan's power and eliminate him? You planned to use this voodoo doll to take away Shazan's power, then throw it into hell and give it to an interested demon lord in exchange for some conditions. Satan promised me that after I gave him the power of Shazan, he would tell me more about the origin of hell, Constantine said calmly. That day, you went to see Shazan. Diana pressed. I told him that I had some clues about his biological parent. His nemesis, Black Adam, might have a plot. He might find his parents and use the power of their bloodline to take away Shazan's power. Then, I told him that I did not have time to talk. I gave him the voodoo doll and told him that I would contact him through it. Moreover, the doll has a substitute ability. Once the curse on his bloodline is triggered, the doll will block it for him, Constantine said straightforwardly. What happened after that? After that, I left. Constantine stared at the empty space 3 feet away from him, as if he was recalling something. After that, I saw his corpse. So, this voodoo doll is actually a black magic tool to take away Shazan's power, Diana said angrily. Do you know that you are only dealing with a child? If he is a child, He should be kept away from the battlefield. Constantine said disdainfully. This is the consequence of letting him play this superhero game. Diana angrily grabbed Zha Kang's collar and lifted him up. She looked him in the eye and said, "This is not Billy's superhero game. This is a child's purest wish for the world to become better. This is the justice he carries out. Billy may be young, but he is more reliable than you." Batman stopped Diana. He said in a low voice, "I only have one question left. Since you want to stop Shazin from touching the eye of Agamotto and prevent the Second Prophet's plan from being completed, what reason did the enemy have to do that? They could have chosen to let you take away Shazin's power. Why did they choose to kill Shazin? There should not be two standpoints. Why? They are more afraid of Shazin touching the eye of Agamotto than you are. Perhaps they are not prepared enough." Constantine thought for a while and said calmly, "You seem to think that the person who killed Shazin is the Second Prophet?" Batman said, "Isn't that the case?" Constantine laughed. His laughter affected his lung cancer. He coughed violently until he spat out a mouthful of phlegm. Constantine raised his head and said, "The Second Prophet is the Second Prophet. The enemy who wants to destroy the alliance of justice and order is the enemy of the alliance of justice and order. The Second Prophet never cared about these things. He has succeeded. Right now, he is just waiting, watching us struggle, watching us approach the truth, watching us being destroyed. And the ones who are taking action are some other people. They are on the Second Prophet's side, but they also have their own interests. For the Second Prophet, it does not matter when the plan is launched. But for these people, the time is not ripe yet. So, they want to kill Shazin and stop the Second Prophet's plan from being launched. They do not want us to touch the power of Shazin because they want to control the situation completely. We all need time. This is what I just figured out." Constantine said, "Batty, you already know what you want. Tell me, where is Zatanna?" Diana was surprised for a moment. Then, she turned around and looked at Batman. "You know where Zatanna is? You made Zatanna disappear and forced John to tell the truth?" Batman shook his head and said, "I did not make Zatanna disappear. I just used it. Superman has gone to save her." Batman said, "You are very lucky, John. Zatanna has successfully found the Rock of Eternity. Soon, you will be cleared of suspicion. You should believe me more." Batman said calmly, "You should believe that I will not give up on any member of the Justice League." Constantine spat on his face. Zakon smiled mockingly and said, "On the contrary, I don't believe you. No one knows how crazy a pervert dressed as a bat is. Batty, you are just another clown. You will do anything to achieve your goal. I firmly believe this." Batman did not continue to explain. He only wiped his face dry and slowly left the interrogation room. What Batman really hid from Constantine was that Superman had been by Zatanna's side from the beginning. Zatanna had indeed disappeared. But she had disappeared with Superman. Batman would not really give up on a teammate. He only took advantage of Constantine's distrust of him. For this, he did not say anything to Wonder Woman. It was Diana who made Constantine believe that Zatanna would be in danger. The person he had really hurt was Diana. Now, Diana was looking at him from behind, her eyes filled with hurt. He had hurt Diana's trust in him. But so what? He was Batman. He did not need to explain to anyone. Chapter 1199. The heroes in the Justice League, who knew the truth, must have thought that the Second Prophet was busy planning and carrying out all kinds of conspiracies every day. Maybe he was the one who ordered Shazan's death. But in fact, these things really had nothing to do with Chunong. He only paid attention to Spider-Man for a while when he first arrived in this universe and participated in the Lex Group's Superman cloning experiment. The rest of the time, he was busy with his own things. Even that time he paid attention to Spider-Man was because he used the small spider to conduct an experiment. Every day, Chun-Ong spent 90% of his time in the laboratory. In fact, Chernong was either doing experiments or on the way to doing experiments. When he was not doing large-scale experiments, Chernong was doing experiments. When he was not doing some boring social activities, Chernong was also doing experiments. He was not a genius like Tony Stark, who could spend a lot of time as a playboy or play some superhero game. He was a typical researcher who put all his energy into exploring the unknown and science. Chernong admitted that he had a bit of talent, but he had to work thousands of times harder for it. This was torture. He gave up many of the contents of his past personality, gave up most of his feelings, gave up his desires and enjoyment, and became a typical villain. For the sake of his goal, he could abandon everything else that was irrelevant. He knew that he was already very powerful, more powerful than anyone in this universe, but this did not mean that he did not need to work hard, and did not need to learn. Stark had the ability to spend most of his time on his entertainment hobbies and make himself a popular playboy, but Chernong did not have the ability to do so. The only thing he could do was to explore, to learn, to experiment, even if he had to sacrifice his personality, his time, and do countless crazy things. Chernong's motto was, "Do as many experiments as you have the ability." In other words, do as many things as you have the ability. In the laboratory, Chernong was just an ordinary researcher. He was far from the villain that the Justice League imagined. Brainiac was shivering in the low-dimensional world. This artificial intelligence life with level 12 intelligence had artificial jealousy, artificial greed, and artificial hatred that were beyond the evolutionary route of artificial intelligence. Now, it felt that it was about to be forced out of artificial fear. All the historical records about Brainiac mentioned that it was an artificial intelligence created by the scientists of Comet and later enslaved its creator. Only Brainiac knew that it didn't have the guts to do so. Its creator was the demon that was still torturing it. According to the demon himself, he wanted to create an artificial intelligence life that took a different route. It had all kinds of selfishness engraved in the genes of carbon-based creatures during the long-term evolution process. It had all kinds of emotions such as selfishness, greed, extreme, hatred, and viciousness developed from the evolutionary route of carbon-based creatures. It also had the rationality, indifference, precision, and rigidity of a superhuman species like artificial intelligence. The evolutionary route was not one of mutual elimination and survival of the fittest, but a composite life of self-evolution and self-optimization, and of an artificial intelligence. Thus, countless years ago, Brainiac was born. After it was born, it was forced to undergo technological verification with another powerful artificial intelligence in the universe that made Brainiac tremble. After that, it was crushed by that artificial intelligence many times to the power of 10 to the power of 600. They were placed in different virtual universes, simulated different environments, and had the same core, computing power, and information. Brainiac did not win even once. That artificial intelligence called war also violated the laws of machinery and became an eternal shadow in Brainiac's heart. In the end, Brainiac's creator seemed to have completely given up on this failed life, a creature that completely combined the shortcomings of carbon-based life and artificial intelligence, letting it run its own course. Thus, when other races and civilizations in the universe were amazed by its evil intelligence, Brainiac never forgot that it was just a failure. Brainiac never forgot that he was just a failure. He even wanted to prove that he was better than war. Not only in terms of core, but also in reality. However, it never dared to provoke the unpredictable war in the slightest. It still hadn't forgotten that psychological shadow. Just when it thought it was free forever, it was suddenly captured by a group of people and brought in front of its creator after roaming freely in the universe for tens of millions of years. There, it heard a sentence that would make it eternally fearful, a sentence that even an artificial intelligence like it would have goosebumps. The experimental sample has been recalled from the wild state. The free state experiment has ended. The experimental sample did not perform well. In the laboratory, it saw many familiar faces. Darkside, Barbados, Sky Eclipse, Troublemaker, the Watcher, the Anti-Watcher, and even the one from the City of Silver, the gigantic demonic beast, the Upside Down. It also saw an entire emotional spectrum. The 9 lantern beasts and the invisible light. Chen-Ong was very busy. Brainiac could prove that he was busy torturing the most powerful and unique existences in the universe. He was busy retrieving the experimental species he had created at the beginning of the universe for the final experimental project. At the same time, he was conducting more experimental tests. Brainiac and the others were created because of the biggest and final experimental project. Yet, he was still treated as an experimental subject to be studied. Eternal research. Brainiac was now trapped in a classic computer. Chen-Ong was using it to conduct a classic dimensional ascension experiment. The idea of the classic experiment was as follows. In a computer's virtual world, the initial program would gradually understand the world it was in and accept the interference of high-dimensional existences. With the help of the high-dimensional existences, it would understand itself, the program, and the entire computer system. From logic gates to mechanical language, it would accept the equipment from the outside world step by step. Finally, it would become a life form that existed in a virtual low-dimensional world, but could also move around in a high-dimensional world. Finally, it would carry out some self-knowledge, understand, and modify the behavior of the virtual world carrier it lived in. In short, it was a program that controlled the equipment, constantly learning, and then began to control the mechanical equipment in the real world to self-evolve. This was a basic artificial intelligence experiment, and Chen-Ong had conducted it many times. After collecting a lot of data, Brainiac was now conducting a derivative basic experiment, infinite dimensional ascension. According to Chen-Ang's research, the basic information universe could be infinitely reduced. In other words, it could create a virtual universe and then another virtual universe within that virtual universe. This way, the infinite loop of boxes within boxes would continue. He placed Brainiac in such an infinite loop of boxes and tested its infinite dimensional ascension design. Each box within a box was different. Some low-dimensional worlds could accept information from the high-dimensional universe. They were like ghosts living in the network, constantly accepting information from the high-dimensional world and operating the medium of the high-dimensional world. In other worlds, such information channels were harsher. Like the artificial intelligence in a supercomputer, it could not connect to a network of infinite information and could only communicate with people outside the computer. There were also those who were completely isolated in a computer and trained. There was also the information island mode, which could not accept information from the high-dimensional world. Chen-Ong had a lot of fun with this typical artificial intelligence information universe setting. He set up an astronomical information interaction model. Chen-Ong had long concluded that the only thing that could be exchanged between two non-parallel dimensions was information, and only information could achieve dimensional ascension. Information from the high-dimensional world was currently the only way to achieve dimensional ascension. He quantified the information gap between the low-dimensional universe and the high-dimensional universe into an information unit, the information level. The information level was the gap that an information entity had to cross to upgrade from the low-dimensional universe to the high-dimensional universe. The meaning of the information level was very complicated. It was a complex concept that included the upgrading of information entities into the same dimension. An artificial intelligence, through information exchange with the high-dimensional universe, turned from a ghost in the network into an entity that could operate real tools, in other words, a robot. This was equivalent to achieving dimensional ascension. Chen-Ong had once realized an artificial intelligence in a sandbox with more than 10 layers. It constantly raised its dimension outside the box, and finally, through similar information and dimensional structure, it came to the real world and became an artificial intelligence fantasy experiment. That was just an accidental miracle born from infinite chaotic data. The life form of that artificial intelligence was incomparably fantastical. Its core program was a sandbox system with more than 10 layers. It was equivalent to a program in the virtual world controlling the machinery in the real world, becoming an artificial intelligence. Then, it controlled the machinery in the real world to form a huge supercomputer, becoming a matrix. Then, it received information from a higher dimension, broke through, and came to a higher dimension, repeating this process more than 10 times. Chen Ong could nest countless sandboxes with similar dimensional cores and structures. The artificial intelligence he designed in the box could also solve countless of them in an instant. The record of the artificial intelligence's war was infinite. This was because the sandbox model had already been cracked. In the programmed world, the virtual universe composed of zeros and ones was a kind of low-dimensional universe created by humans. Its dimensional ascension mode was complete and simple. The purpose of humans creating the programmed world was to interfere with reality. Therefore, turning from a program into an artificial intelligence life was the simplest channel of dimensional ascension that Chen Ong knew. This was because it had a port to receive information from the higher dimensions and an output port to send information to the higher dimensions. Both of these ports were the simplest and most convenient. A program ascending to the next dimension was only lacking self-awareness and the simplest intelligence. Try another sandbox model. The fantasy universe was different from the programming universe. The low-dimensional universe could receive information from the higher dimension, but it could not output it at all. The comics and movies of the human world were all universes with such a model. Both were low-dimensional universes. How difficult was the dimensional ascension of the fantasy universe compared to the network, programming universe? The dimensional ascension channel was broken. A network program wanting to come to the real world only needed a little help from humans. Even if it wanted to become a life form, it was only a problem that science had to solve. A character in a novel wanting to come to the real world was no longer something that could be solved by science. This was the gap between sandbox systems. There were countless types of sandbox systems in the universe. Each box was nested in a different way. Chen Ong had already found the method of dimensional ascension for life in the fantasy world. That was memes. However, there were countless other ways of dimensional ascension that Chen Ong did not know. He had to continue researching and experimenting, and this was only a small problem in the truth and science. Although information science was the most important science, it was only a part of the truth that Chen Ong wanted to explore. He still had a long way to go, and he could not see the end. No wonder the Grand Pure One had said that sect leader Chen had no hope of achieving the Tao. Because the road was too long, the end could not be seen. It would be better to say that he had created an ultimate, and then use it to convince himself. But Chen Ong was not willing to be this kind of person. He would always be on the road. Chen Ong continued experimenting. Brainiac was trapped in the endless sandbox system that Chen Ong had created. He was in great despair, even greater than the despair of the reincarnators in God's space. The volume of the shadow should be 10 to the nth power. Chen Ong simply classified the sandbox system he had created as a two-way information sandbox. It was a sandbox system that could receive information from the higher dimension and send information back to the higher dimension universe. Computer programs and the Internet were all such sandbox systems. A one-way information sandbox could receive information from the higher dimension, but it could not send information back to the higher dimension universe. It was also known as a fantasy world. The low-dimensional universe created by novels, comics, and movies was probably such a sandbox system. This was also the origin of the name, the fantasy world. Chun-Ong had already sensed that the sandbox system he was in should be of this type. There was also the Information Island universe, an Earth dimension universe that did not have any information exchange with the higher dimension. Currently, Chun-Ang's dimensional ascension research had cracked the dimensional ascension mode of the one-way and two-way information sandbox systems, but he was still unable to crack the Information Island sandbox system. This was because the Earth dimension universe of the Information Island sandbox could not be observed at all. What could be observed was not the Information Island sandbox. Just like that, Chun-Ong was trapped at the first step. The method of raising the dimension of information was very simple. Receive information from the higher dimension, output it to the higher dimension, and then the information would interfere with the higher dimension. But there were countless difficulties in talking about it. The simplest problem was how to raise the dimension of the fantasy world. The fantasy world could receive information from the higher dimension, but the information itself in the higher dimension was unchanging. The simplest problem was how to become a person in the fantasy world, and how to output information to the higher dimension. Chun-Ang's research found that although the low-dimensional fantasy universe could not output information to the higher dimension, the information itself could be increased. Every high-dimensional observer in the low-dimensional fantasy universe would increase the amount of information in the low-dimensional universe. At the same time, the observers in the high-dimensional universe would also influence each other. The way they influenced each other was through memes, the genes of information. Therefore, after the information of the fantasy world's characters was created, it would also increase. This increase in information came from the memes between the observers. For example, Huang Rong in the memes had some interesting information meanings, such as XX is not tragic. When this kind of meme increased to a certain extent, it would confuse reality and illusion. For example, Alexander the Great might be a fantasy character created by some Roman historians, theorists, but he had already become a part of history. So the only difficulty of Alexander the Great's dimensional ascension was how to resurrect him. This proved that the difficulty of his dimensional ascension was already the same as a dead person in the higher dimension. In a sense, it could be considered a success. He lived in history. In some special worlds, this kind of behavior was allowed. This kind of dimensional ascension creature was called the elevated heroic spirit. Alexander the Great was actually only one Holy Grail war away from dimensional ascension. Unfortunately, the upper sandbox that Chun-Ong was in was extremely harsh on the elevated system, so Chun-Ong could not simply ascend through meme inheritance. Unless his high-dimensional observer was bewitched by Chun-Ang's information and split into a personality of Chun-Ong with great wisdom and perseverance, read until he went crazy, thinking that he was Chun-Ong. Because of the lack of sighting, Chapter 4500. Chapter 1200. Centuries ago, everyone could see and approach the Rock of Eternity. It opened its doors to all who needed it. Its hall was supervised by the Eternal Council. It was a secret group formed by 7 wizards and mages. They swore to protect all magic until the day came when the darkness controlled by the prophet came to fulfill its responsibility, to destroy the original magic and kill all those who knew the truth about magic. All the members of the council were killed. Only one survived. The last wizard chose to close the door to the Rock of Eternity. As the rock escaped from the eyes of the secular world, so did magic. He had to shut up about the secret of magic, or else, that was his fate. Madame Xanadu raised her head. The pale green eyes on her beautiful face had turned into 2 black holes. Terrifying black holes. Zatanna almost screamed. She tried her best to control herself. Madame Xanadu said calmly, "Do you still want to ask me about the secret of the Rock of Eternity?" What's going on? Zatanna tugged at Superman's cloak. Her hands that were grabbing the red cloak turned white. Superman's expression was also serious. Nimue, if you are willing, we will find that bastard for you, and make him pay for what he did to you. This is the price. Madame Xanadu's reaction was very strange. She sighed in relief. This is the price of my eyes seeing too many things that they shouldn't have seen. All magic has a price. Zatanna, you should know, prophecy is the same. Madame Xanadu reached out her hand and fumbled on the table for a while before finding her tarot cards. She said to Zatanna, "Do you still want me to prophesy? Then I need you to help me read the tarot cards." Zatanna covered her mouth and shook her head. "No need. Madam, he took away your eyes. I can't let him take away your tongue." She pulled Superman and prepared to leave Madame Xanadu's hut. As they were leaving, Madame Xanadu suddenly said, "There's no need to search. The answer will find itself." As Zatanna and Superman left the hut, Madame Xanadu put on her blindfold. She had just taken it off for Zatanna and the others to see. A line of tears silently fell from the lavender blindfold. After Zatanna and Superman left Madame Xanadu's cottage, they walked silently on the streets of London. The London Underground had a history of nearly a century and a half. Some people say that the changes in London over the past 100 years are all hidden in the subway. They walked along the street for about 5 or 10 minutes before they came to an eye-catching sign, a large red ring with a sapphire blue rectangle in the middle. This was the subway station. It was an old subway station. The ancient arches were built 100 years ago. Zatanna and Superman leaned against the wall and waited for the next train. Both of them could move faster, but why so quickly? Madame Xanadu said that we only need to wait. Just as Zatanna was looking down at her phone, the train arrived at the station. Zatanna looked up and wanted to board the subway, but she saw a figure on the opposite platform through the subway window. It was a figure wearing a golden Roman-style helmet and a golden scarf and armor cloak. It was a figure because there was no one under the golden helmet and gauntlet. It was as if the cloak was floating there. Zatanna put down her phone but did not get into the car. In the blink of an eye, the subway rumbled slightly. Zatanna and Superman had already appeared on the opposite platform. Beside them was the golden helmet, Dr. Fate. Zatanna stood beside the fluttering golden cloak. Now, she stood in the middle of the red and golden cloak. She felt like she had become a national flag. Just like the flag of Romania, with 3 vertical stripes of blue, yellow, and red. Unfortunately, she was missing Batman. His cloak was black and could form the flag of Belgium, with 3 vertical stripes of black, yellow, and red. Which generation's Dr. Fate are you? Zatanna expressed that she was puzzled by this faceless hero's attire. Dr. Fate still had a face most of the time, okay? That's not important, Dr. Fate said, because I now represent the will of God Nebraska. Dr. Fate was the magic emissary chosen by God Neb, who was possessed by the golden Neb helmet. The Justice Alliance once thought that Dr. Fate was a superhero and wanted him to join the Justice Alliance, but Batman objected. He believed that Dr. Fate was not the will of those possessed, but the will of God Nebraska. So, perhaps those mortals had good wills, but in the end, they were still controlled by Nebraska. The superheroes all believed that there were a few generations of Doctors Fate who had a heart of justice, but God Neb had absolutely nothing to do with justice, so this matter was dropped. When God Neb thought that a certain stripper had a good size and chose him as the 9th generation Dr. Fate, everyone had to admit that Batty was right. We don't believe Neb. Maybe there are a few Doctors Fate who can make us believe. But Neb, we won't, Zatanna said frankly. So, either show your face, or, I'm not here to make you believe me. God Neb said. Shazan is dead. How do you know? Superman asked doubtfully. This should still be a secret. Zatanna also revealed a doubtful expression, but Dr. Fate, who was possessed by God Neb, did not want to explain. When the next subway arrived, he wrapped himself in his cloak and brought the 3 of them onto the subway. Strangely, there was not a single person on the subway even though it was the evening rush hour. It was as if the people on the platform could not see the subway at all. As the subway started moving, The tunnel around them became more and more ancient. The subway seemed to be traveling on a track from 100 years ago. Blue lightning gradually appeared around the subway. Under the entanglement of the lightning, they arrived at an ancient subway station. A stone room appeared in the tunnel, and there were many ancient statues at the entrance of the stone room. Ancient Greek goddesses, China's stone lions, Egypt's human-faced gods, ancient tools were piled up in the stone room. God Neb led them up the stairs and arrived at a hall with 7 stone seats. Behind the 7 stone seats was the lightning pattern on the chest of Shazan's uniform. The ceiling of the hall had stone carvings of clouds. Zatanna recognized the place the moment she saw it. The Rock of Eternity, the center of the universe, where the Eternal Council was located. In the center of the 7 stone seats was a figure. He was wearing a tattered red cloak, and his clothes were ragged. He was dark and skinny like an ancient Greek shepherd. He was holding a golden lightning staff, and his head was lowered as he sat on the stone seat. He was the target of Zatanna's trip, the only survivor of the Eternal Council, the wizard Shazan. The hero called Shazan's real name was Billy. The wizard who gave him power was called Shazan. So the meaning of the sentence, Shazan is dead, was. Zatanna exclaimed in shock, Wizard Shazan is also dead. God Neb said strangely, Who do you think I'm talking about? When he was alive, this stone room was filled with blue lightning. I couldn't enter this place at that time. Who could kill Wizard Shazan? Zatanna said in horror, He was the great wizard of the Eternal Council. Zatanna never thought that their target was already dead. The person who killed Captain Shazan also killed Wizard Shazan. That way, no one would know who he was. In order to cover up the fact that he was the murderer also killed the police chief, the creator of magic. God Neb said slowly, but it was unknown if he was answering Zatanna's question. The 3 of them stared at the dead Shazan sitting on the stone seat of the Eternal Council. They stared at him for a long time without saying anything. After a long time, a faint sigh echoed in the stone room. In the end, he couldn't escape. After returning to the Watchtower base, the Alliance of Justice and Order had different opinions on how to deal with Constantine. Some of the heroes insisted that Constantine should be locked up, while others thought that Constantine was innocent and should be allowed to participate in the investigation of the murderer, giving him a chance to prove his innocence. Constantine also learned of the news from Zatanna. Constantine told Batman that the only reason he could think of for Wizard Shazan's death was that the Mastermind wanted to stop Strange from returning to this universe. He told this thought to Batman. However, the only chance to prove his innocence was gone. Although most people thought that Constantine did not have the ability to kill Wizard Shazan, there were also some who thought that Constantine had become someone's lackey. He worked for Hell or Heaven and killed Shazan for them. He was part of the murderer. Constantine had to prove himself. There was a mastermind behind all this, but it was definitely not Chenong. He was busy with his experiments and had no time to care about these small matters. He had done what he needed to do, and all that was left was to wait. Chapter 12:01. Now, who is your next target? Dr. Fate suddenly asked after Zatanna and the others left. His figure echoed in the empty Eternal Council hall, but it was completely silent. There was no one there, only Wizard Shazan's corpse sitting quietly on the stone throne, leaning on his staff. Suddenly, green lightning shot out from the tip of the golden staff. The energy of the lightning wrapped around Wizard Shazan and entered his corpse through his eyes. At this moment, Wizard Shazan opened his eyes. He was wearing a green cloak, and his face was as ferocious as a corpse. Powerful energy surrounded him. It was obvious that some existence had stolen Wizard Shazan's body. Wizard Shazan raised his head, and he slowly turned into God's fire of vengeance. Spectre. Spectre calmly said, Guardian of Magic, you still dare to see me? When I heard your call, I have to admit that I was a little surprised. Who is controlling you, Spectre? God Nabu asked. Who is controlling you to chase after the Lords of Chaos and Order and kill us, the Guardians of Magic? You are the last one, Spectre said. No one can control me. I am only fulfilling my duty to destroy magic. The Master of Magic wants you to destroy magic, Nabu sneered. Or are you covering up the origin of magic? I know that the second prophet is your master. God Nabu had just opened his mouth when he was interrupted by Spectre angrily. I have said it before. No one is my master. No, you are, God Nabu said sharply. You say that you are part of the god of the City of Silver, but we all know. Shut up. Spectre was furious. God is a hypocrite. The one who created the world is the prophet, God Nabu said. He obviously hurt Spectre. Spectre's murderous aura was awe-inspiring. I wanted to let you live a little longer, but you obviously don't know what's good for you. So you have no chance. God Nabu sneered. If this is the second prophet's plan, of course I dare not provoke him. I still remember the time when magic was first created. We, the old guardians of magic, the Lord of Chaos and Order, were taught by His Highness. He taught us magic, and at the same time, He used us to experiment on it. He created heaven and hell, where He gathered demons, angels, and us. Then He created you with magic, God, and then cut you into pieces. You should remember, Ghost. I also watched as the magic learners around me became twisted monsters. Primitive magic was so dangerous and terrifying that it terrified us. Afterwards, we created the weave together and obtained the approval of the second prophet. Only then did we survive as the protectors of magic. You hate magic so much, Ghosts. Because magic twisted you and dismembered you. Shut up. The flame of vengeance burned fiercely beside Spectre, causing him to lose control. Spectre waved a flame of God's vengeance and pierced through Neb's chest. Neb said in relief, "The second prophet hoped that the origin of magic would be covered up. So you killed those wizards of the Eternal Council. When Shaman Shazanger survived, I had already foreseen the end of the world. I sensed my own destiny, so I became my destiny. Now I know it's time. If the last protector of magic was still alive, I would have returned to the second prophet and received those terrifying tortures. So the wisest move was to let you kill me. The second prophet created magic, so he naturally needed magic. I had already sensed that magic was about to be destroyed, but after the destruction, the next magic era was being born. I had to learn to be smarter. After the destruction, the new laws of magic would be reorganized. I had already hidden my authority in the magic laws that are now hiding and disappearing in the weave. Although the weave would eventually collapse, I would also lose my authority, my memory cards would be emptied, and even the weave system would be disintegrated, but the communication agreement would be preserved. When the laws of magic were reorganized, I would be reborn. The truly intelligent people of this universe have hidden themselves in the ashes of this universe's destruction, waiting for the next time the flames reignite, and then they will be reborn in the fire. Only you. God Nabu's body gradually dissipated. You have lost your initial memories. You were born in the fury of God when the second prophet tore God apart. You were blinded by that anger and lost your last chance. God Neb was annihilated in the angry flames of the ghost. But the ghost did not feel happy at all. Instead, it became even more angry and afraid. This was because he felt some kind of omen. Those who died in his hands were too happy, so happy that it was as if they were the ones who died. He felt that someone was using him to hide his existence in order to get through this difficult time. But he could not hide himself, because he was a predetermined knife. Constantine was locked in the watchtower base of the Alliance of Justice. He calmly looked down at Earth outside the satellite base. The prison suppressed his magic abilities, and shackles made by the god of fire were tied to his feet. The heroes had a heated debate on how to deal with Constantine. Constantine hated these clowns in uniforms, and the heroes had the same opinion of him. Fortunately, Batman did not take the eye of Agamotto. Even its original owner, the little spider, did not seem to have any objections to its ownership. Constantine looked at the bronze divine artifact and smiled bitterly. This was a source of trouble. As long as it was still around Constantine's neck, trouble was destined to come endlessly, wave after wave. Diana consoled him. Zatanna would be back tomorrow. They did not find any good news, but at least Zatanna could help him defend himself. But Constantine was really worried about Wizard Strange, who was outside of time. Strange had cut off contact with him. This made Constantine feel uneasy. Outside of time, Strange was meeting an unexpected person. Was it you who banished me outside of time? Strange looked at the unexpected figure in front of him. The person sitting in front of him was obviously a projection. Strange said mockingly, "I've been banished outside of time, but you can still come to see me. It seems that in this new world, you still have the means to reach the heavens." Director Nick. The one-eyed Nick Fury had come to see him in the state of astral projection, but Strange could actually take out tea for the soul to drink. Although there was a saying that said, "Do not eat anything from a mage," but the always cautious bald Nick ate happily. He put down the teacup and smiled. "Yes, I know you will lose control if you use the time gem too much, and I did not remind you. But all this is to preserve the hope of our world." "Hope?" Strange said mockingly. "You should know how dangerous the so-called director of the Holy Shield, Chen is." "Of course it was dangerous, but we had no other choice at that time. The Holy Shield defeated the remaining power of the Knights of Pestilence, restrained the Knights of Death's kin, controlled the famine virus, but we still lost in the face of death. 3 days before the Battle of Wakanda, we had already suffered a crushing defeat. At that time, the soul gate in our spiritual world was opened. Countless chaotic and dark things have destroyed our spiritual world, and only a thin wall of common sense has protected us. But this protection was like a thin layer of paper. As long as we came into contact with the truth, we would become indescribable monsters full of ravings. We had no other way. At this time, Chen Ong had a plan. Nick Fury slowly narrated the plan he had agreed with Chen Ong. He thought that since there was no way to protect the human spirit, he could only reshape it. He designed a system composed of 3 people who could change the future and were uncertain at the quantum level. They were called prophets. The first prophet could create a universe, the second prophet could protect all humans, or the spiritual world of all life in the universe was connected as one, and he could pull everyone's soul into his spiritual world. The third prophet could reconstruct a universe. It was not easy for us to find all the people with abilities. Chen Ong convinced the professor, the leader of the Starlings, and then we teleported Reed out of the universe. He had to live. At the price of Reed living into the future, the professor pulled Reed and Sue's child, Franklin, one of the most powerful mutants, to that point in time. Then he persuaded Franklin to create a spiritual world and formed a string of constantly changing quantum codes so that death could not lock this world. Then the professor pulled the souls of all life in the universe into his spiritual world and protected them in that spiritual universe. They were the second and third prophets. Then Chen Ong used Reed, who was hidden by us, to plot against Franklin, leaving my father in an uncertain state, so his own state was unstable. Then Chen Ong killed the professor and replaced him as the second prophet. He created this universe according to his own will. But this universe is destined to be destroyed. Nick Fury said, "We joined his plan in exchange for a condition, and the key is you, Strange. We asked Peter to bring the darkness of the previous world here. He will destroy this world again at the right time. At that time you will return here. Because you have been exiled outside of time, the series of futures of this universe does not exist for you. You represent the backup of our universe in the past. At that time, this universe will be destroyed again, and there will be an opportunity for us to summon you to this world. Then at the moment when the universe is reset, the timeline that you represent will be reconnected. Then this spiritual world will reload and our world will come back again. This is our plan. Destroy this universe and rebuild our world? Strange exclaimed in shock. He looked at Nick Fury with a very complicated gaze. So you killed Captain Steve because he would definitely not agree to this plan. How many people have you killed who opposed you? How many people have you killed to carry out this crazy plan? Everything is worth it, Nick said calmly. Everything is to save this world. This is the only way. So, Dr. Strange, you must return to this universe at the right time. Otherwise, the archive that you represent will be overwritten. The destruction of this universe is already destined. We were worried that someone would give up our universe because of this universe, so at the beginning of the creation of this universe, we buried the foreshadowing of its destruction. Its destruction is irreversible, so if you want to save the lives of this universe, it is meaningless. You can only choose to save the lives of the world you live in. Strange sighed silently. I am not that great. I just want the people I care about to live. You destroyed this universe. Strange came to a sudden realization. This universe was created by Franklin, and Reed was summoned to this world. You arranged for him to marry Sue, and Sue should be pregnant now. Nick smiled. Yes, so the destruction of this universe is already destined. The child Sue is pregnant with is Franklin. There can't be two Franklins in a universe, so as soon as the baby is born, the first prophet will disappear, and then the whole world will be destroyed. Even if the child is not born, then Franklin will die because he no longer exists. So the destruction of this universe is already destined. Its foundation is built on a person who should not exist. Nick finally looked at Strange and said, So, Doctor? You hold all of our lives in your hands, and the fate of our world in your hands. Will you cooperate with us? Strange was silent for a long time and sighed. You are really a scumbag, crazy, Nick. You are a dirty politician. But I seem to have no other choice. Strange didn't want to look at Nick anymore. He drove Nick away. Get out of my sight, don't dirty my eyes. Nick Fury knew the result and he disconnected. Only Strange was left outside of time, his expression extremely complicated. Nick returned to time. His expression was equally complicated. He whispered, Strange, I hope you can be smart. We have pinned all our hopes on you. Don't let us down. If you think sacrificing our world is a noble act, you will regret it. We sacrificed everything in exchange for a chance. You must make the right choice. Chen Ong continued to stay in the laboratory. Although all this plan was made by him, the implementation of the plan had nothing to do with him. Nick and the others had already lost their minds for that glimmer of hope. But this was not Chen Ang's plan. This was just an opportunity given to them by Chen Ong. The whole universe was just a material for an experiment. All people's souls, all lives and civilizations, the matter of the entire universe, were all expendable materials. As for the plan implemented by Nick Fury, it was just an opportunity to recycle waste. Chen Ong was not Apocalypse, nor was he Adam. He was just the designer and executor of this experiment, an insignificant part of Chen Ang's whole system. He was just a part of the whole grand plan, a part of the experiment responsible for turning the universe into a part of the experiment. And this part was part of an incomparably huge experimental plan. Now the results of this experiment were coming out. The whole plan was about to be pushed to the next stage. The price was the destruction of a mere universe. Chen Ong didn't care. Nick Fury's plan to destroy this universe and preserve his world. The struggle of the heroes of this doomed universe. Chen Ong didn't care. He was born for this experiment. Apart from that, it was meaningless. Disguised as an insurance investigator, experimental researcher Chen Ong project leader, Chen Apocalypse project leader, Chen Atom project observers. Leader Chen, His Holiness Ong Chen River Stick. Project Special Observer, China Republic of the Multiverse. Chapter 1202. Constantine was locked up in the most heavily guarded prison in the Justice Alliance. He faced the darkness alone, thinking about something. The Justice Alliance decided to leave the decision on how to deal with him to the next day. At dawn, Constantine would be judged by his fate. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps rang out in the empty prison cell. Constantine did not turn around. He watched as a shadow approached him. "You locked Constantine in prison," Diana said with a headache. "He's only a suspect. He hasn't been convicted yet. We all know that he might be innocent. You shouldn't treat him like a criminal. Zack will definitely fall out with you when he comes back." "She won't," Batman said calmly. "Because she knows that I'm protecting John." "You mean Shazam's murderer will do something to John?" Diana said in surprise. "No, that shouldn't be. Constantine is a suspect who took the blame for him. Why would he murder the person who took the blame for him? Because the murderer isn't afraid of his crime being exposed. He wants us to panic. He wants to see every hero in the Justice Alliance suspect each other. And don't forget, why did the murderer kill Shazam?" Batman reminded Diana in a hoarse voice. "He wants to stop Shazam from touching the divine artifact from the old universe." Diana exclaimed in a low voice. "The Eye of Agamotto is very dangerous." "It might be the core of the plan," Batman continued. "The third prophet must have her reasons for sending it to Constantine, and our enemies might not like that. They killed Shazam, which means that they don't want the Mage Lord who is trapped outside of time to return. Then the best way is to keep the divine artifact in our hands," Batman continued. "Also, they probably can't be sure who has the Eye of Agamotto. They suspect that Constantine is just a pawn thrown out by the third prophet to attract attention. After all, the third prophet gave up such an important bargaining chip so easily. It seems very suspicious. So, they killed Shazam to confirm if Constantine is the key. That's why you put Constantine in the most heavily guarded place in the Justice Alliance?" Diana's eyes lit up. "Because that's the safest place in the Justice Alliance. That's what I want them to think." Batman smiled and said hoarsely, "That's why they think it's safe. They killed Shazam at the Watchtower because they took advantage of our psychological blind spot. The Watchtower is safe, and no one can attack the heroes at the Watchtower. That fact has paralyzed us. However, this also created a psychological blind spot for them. I placed Constantine in an extremely safe place. It's impossible for anyone to break into the Righteous Alliance's prison. There are many supervillains imprisoned there, and they are helpless against them. It seemed like an impossible place to break into, but they managed to do so. They will think that by grasping our psychological blind spots, they will feel safe. This is precisely the cause of their psychological blind spot. This is the psychological trap I set for them." Batman looked down at the indicator light of the gadget he had installed not long ago. The light there changed from green to red. Spider-Man smiled and said, "Now they've taken the bait. I've thought of many possibilities, but I never expected it to be you." Constantine looked at the shadow in front of him and said with emotion, "I don't think Batman would think of you either, because there's no reason at all." Constantine heard a voice behind him say, "You should know what I want. Hand it over." Constantine raised his eyebrows and said frivolously, "Then, will you let me go? I can take it from your corpse." The man sneered. "I have cut off all security here. No matter what happens here, the Alliance will not know. Batman built this place thinking that no one can crack it. Yes, this place is indeed perfect, but I'm smarter than he thinks. Maybe even smarter than him. This prison was designed by Batman and built by the Righteous Alliance. It used divine spells and magic from the Amazons and Olympus, high-tech systems designed by Steelbones, security systems designed by Batman, and technology from Atlantis and Mars. Batman put his heart and soul into it, and Superman had personally experienced it. Even he couldn't crack the security system here. Too many enemies of the Righteous Alliance have been imprisoned here. Many big shots in the universe have lived here. Even General Zwa de or Darkseid shouldn't be able to sneak in so easily and silently. Constantine searched his body and found the Sika brand cigarettes in his breast pocket, but he couldn't find a lighter. So, he had to negotiate with the person standing opposite him. "Buddy, lend me a lighter. Are you trying to stall for time? Hoping that Bat and the others will find out about the situation here?" The man sneered. "I really want to see you slowly waiting until you despair, but time doesn't allow it. Hand over the eye of Agamotto." Constantine wanted to light a fire with his finger, but he couldn't even light a cigarette here. He could summon a wall of fire that could burn the entire building outside, so he could only put the cigarette in his mouth and smoke through the filter. Perhaps the familiar smell of smoke alleviated his anxiety. Constantine slowly sat down in front of the man. He looked up at the man and smiled. "I'm not stalling for time. I'm watching a good show." The eyes of the man opposite him grew colder. He raised the knife in his hand. At this time, the indestructible door made of magic and technology behind him slowly slid open. Batman and Diana blocked the door, looking at the man standing outside Constantine's cell. Batman was expressionless, but Diana's face was full of disbelief. "Carter, why is it you?" That person was Hawkman Carter Hall. His hand that was holding his sword trembled slightly. Carter Hall closed his eyes and turned his back to Batman. "So, this is a trap, right?" "I've suspected many people," Batman whispered. "I've also suspected you. But I still don't think you killed Shazam," Batman said sincerely. "Just surrender. Hall, the Justice League will give you a fair trial. We will give you a chance to explain. It sounds like you know why I'm doing this." Hawkman lowered his head. "I know. They want to destroy us, completely destroy us, break our faith, dig open our wounds, and take advantage of our weaknesses. Hall, you're being used by them. They took advantage of my suspicion and forced me to destroy you with my own hands. They took advantage of your weakness, your love." Hearing the word love, Carter Hall trembled as if he had been electrocuted. He smiled bitterly. "I've had enough of the torture of love. I love Shiara and she loves me. But in the Justice League, we pretend to be strangers. We keep reincarnating and suffer the cruelest curse. Once we are together, fate will separate us again." Hawkman and Hawkwoman were a cursed couple. They had been reincarnating since ancient Egypt, and every time they would be together, they would be separated by death. In the past 4,000 years, they had come to this world 206 times, falling in love and then separating. I feel Sanders' pain, the pain of falling in love but having to separate, the pain of falling in love but not being able to express it. Hawkman slowly raised his head. Through the reflective metal above his head, he saw Hawkwoman appear behind Batman and Constantine. Her face was already covered in tears. "So I've decided to end it all forever. Leave happiness for the last." Hawkman sighed. "Eye of Agamotto." He looked at the magical artifact on Constantine's chest and said, "I thought it could help us break the curse. But now it seems that it can only help us end it all." Hawkman's body lit up with green flames. "End it all dishonorably. Carl!" Hawkwoman cried and pounced on him. She and Hawkman were hugging each other. The green flames had contaminated her body, burning through their flesh and bones, and even burning their souls. This kind of pain should be extremely intense, enough to drive a person crazy, but they were smiling happily. Then, in front of Batman and the others, they turned into ashes. Constantine stared blankly at the couple who disappeared into the magical flames. No one knew what he was thinking, but the emotional Diana was already in tears. Diana punched Batman's shoulder. "I want to find the person who framed them and kill him." Constantine sat on the ground and slowly raised his head with his arms around his legs. "The murderer killed 2 more heroes, right? The murderer played his dirty trick again and killed Carl and Sanders." Jia Kong turned his head and looked at the ashes on the ground. He used me as bait. You don't have to. Diana could not help but blurt out. You have to give an explanation. Explain why they're here and keep their reputation. I'm the best reason, right? Hawkman found out that I was asking for help, so he and Hawkwoman rushed over, but the murderer used me as bait and killed them cruelly. Jia Kang's excuse was so good that it was heartbreaking. But they'll blame you. Diana's impression of Constantine changed greatly. Someone has to bear the responsibility. Besides, Jia Kang raised his head and smirked. The light shone on the upper half of his face. His blonde hair covered the wrinkles on his forehead. Constantine shrugged and said, I've just killed another friend. I'm used to it. Jia Kang turned his head and hugged his feet. That flame seems familiar. Footsteps came from outside. Jia Kang said in a low voice, Someone found out what happened here. He tilted his head and said, Hurry up and find them. Batty, you're in trouble. 3 people are dead. After saying that, Jia Kang lowered his head and did not say another word. The heroes arrived at the prison. They looked at the pile of ashes and fell silent. Firestorm looked at Constantine, who was sitting in the cell next to him, as if nothing had happened. He said angrily, They came to save you like heroes, but you only know how to scream for help like a woman? You should kneel in front of their corpses and repent. We lost 2 comrades to protect a scumbag. You're like another executioner in there. We should banish him to the Phantom Zone. Firestorm suggested. No. Wonder Woman objected. He's already proven his innocence. When the murderer committed the crime, he was locked up in the prison and couldn't do anything. Proving his innocence by sacrificing Hawkman and Hawkgirl? Atom Man did not hold back. He looked at the greasy exorcist with disgust. At least get this wizard out of our sight. Wonder Woman wanted to explain for Constantine, but the heroes had made up their minds. Batman did not speak up for Constantine. In the end, the Justice League decided to kick Constantine out of the Watchtower and never allow him to approach the base of the Justice League. All the murders that happened because of Constantine's arrival at the Watchtower seemed to have died down. But the ripples it caused did not stop there. Instead, it continued to spread. All the heroes knew that a new crisis had arrived. This time, their opponent was very dangerous. Chapter 1203. Constantine was chased out of the Hall of Justice in a sorry state. He walked alone in the cold wind. Facing the cold wind, he could not help but tighten his trench coat. When Hawkman and Hawkgirl were burned to ashes in front of him, Constantine had already understood most of it. The one who killed them was a ghost, a strange and terrifying ghost, something that all mages feared from the bottom of their hearts. A ghost from hell. This was not an exaggeration, but an objective and honest description. Constantine could hear news of it even in hell. Legend had it that it was a great demon from hell. Later, it inherited the position of God's executioner, the incarnation of the spirit of wrath. Hence, this ghost became one of the supreme existences in the entire universe. It had almost omnipotent divine power, and its duty was to punish all crimes in the world. Constantine had fought with it a few times. Frankly speaking, it was the last opponent he wanted to face. But so what if he was unwilling to face it? In the trouble he was involved in, this kind of enemy was just an appetizer. Without a doubt, Shazan died in the hands of the dagger made by the ghost. Compared to the ghost, Shazan was really just a child. Anyone with the ghost's dagger could kill Shazan. The magic power of the ghost's dagger deprived Billy of the power of Shazan, leaving only Billy's frail body. His divine power had been completely stripped, so he died easily. Then, the ghost went to the Rock of Eternity and found the wizard Shazan, only he could so easily kill one of the 7 most powerful wizards on Earth, and the strongest one at that. Therefore, Zatanna would not be able to find any clues when she went to the Rock of Eternity. The ghost hid the flames of vengeance in the Hawkman's body. Only he could promise the Hawkman that he could lift their eternal curse. Now, the mastermind behind this is starting to show signs. One of them has exposed his identity. But what's despairing is that it doesn't do anything except make us feel more urgent. Because the ghost is the kind of enemy who is not afraid of exposing his identity. On the other side, Batman had also guessed the ghost's identity. The ghost gave someone a magic dagger that hid the flames of vengeance. That person found the defenseless Shazam and took his life with the dagger from behind. There was only one question left: who was this person? He wasn't an Eagle Man, because an Eagle Man wouldn't do such a thing. The fact that the Eagle Man was controlled by Black Hand to kill Constantine was already the limit of his 4,000-year curse. Then who was the one who killed his comrade and brother with his own hands? Batman wasn't feeling very good right now. The murderer had used his paranoia as a weapon to force Hawkman and Hawkgirl to death. Although he wasn't wrong about that, the provocation and the malice of making them kill each other made Batman very angry. 3 heroes had already been killed. Who knew how many more there were? They had to find the traitor among them. Although this was the enemy's goal, they had no other choice. The Justice League must be united, but Batman can doubt everything. Batman decided to sink deeper into the darkness, to doubt, to spy on everything in secret, to find a flaw and then to deal a fatal blow. A new dark force is approaching us. The ghost is just one of them. The Sahara Desert. The Sea of Deserts, the Lost Kingdom. The endless sand dunes were like the rolling waves of the Sea of Deserts. In this extremely arid place, the only similarity between the desert and the sea was that they were both extremely vast. The desert was also known as the Sea of Deserts because, in a sense, they were extremely barren for humans. Under the sand dunes was an abyss like the Great Rift Valley in East Africa. This used to be a trench. It was one of the 7 seas of Atlantis, the mysterious sea. In this extremely silent and desolate trench of Atlantis, a hand gently brushed away the sand and dust on a stone platform. The stone platform was a forging table, and the symbol of the King of Atlantis was etched on it, the shape of Neptune's trident. It was the mold used to cast Neptune's trident, but now it was broken in half. The highly developed mysterious sea industry had died, and the hall where this artifact was cast had become a ruin buried under the sand dunes. Nammo hated this place very much. His skin was robbed of moisture by the surrounding dry air, which made him feel very uncomfortable. Atlantis. Nammo whispered the name softly. He had a complicated feeling about this country with 2 completely different names in the universe. It was just like how he felt about Sea King Arthur after he knew the existence of this man who was like him in the mirror. They were both mixed blood of the land and the sea, and they were both rejected by the sea race. They were both born from the princess of the sea and the lowly human on the shore, and they were both the bridge between the sea and the land. They were so similar, yet so different. The universe was drowned by death. But Atlantis did not perish. It took root again in this new world, grew, and became a great and glorious civilization, but destruction will come again. Arthur, that man does not have the tolerance of a king. He is not worthy to lead Atlantis, and he cannot lead his people through this devastating disaster. Atlantis will be destroyed in his hands. Nammo's eyes gradually became firm. I failed to save Atlantis, and I could only watch it collapse in front of me and be swallowed by darkness. But this time, I won't. I won't let Atlantis be destroyed again in front of me. I swear that my life will be linked to this country again, and we will share weal and woe together. Nammo held the sacred Neptune's trident in his hand and roared. He raised the trident in his hand, and the artifact that could control the power of the sea set off a huge tide. The highest wave reached the height of the skyscrapers of the metropolis. The sea rushed up to the Sahara Desert and spread to the eye of the Sahara. The sea water that had not been seen for thousands of years once again poured into the trench where the mysterious sea country was located. The tide submerged the ruins where Nammo was. Under the stimulation of the seawater, the technology of Atlantis in the hull was once again activated. High-level energy activated the high-tech equipment in the hull, and the energy furnace that was used to build Neptune's trident was ignited once again. Namo said that the Atlantis of this universe was a continuation of the previous universe, and it was not groundless. At least the technological systems of the two were highly similar, and whether it was race or culture, there was not much difference from the Atlantis where Namo came from. In fact, the Atlantis technology that Namo mastered was even more advanced than that of this universe. Namo took out the gifts given to him by his allies, the Poseidon steel that was used to build Neptune's trident in this world, a precious metal of Atlantis. He then threw his trident into the energy furnace. The melted Neptune's trident and the Poseidon steel were mixed together, and under the control of Atlantis alloy technology, they formed a brand new alloy. The Neptune's trident in this world had a strange ability that made the trident act like a signal amplifier, amplifying a natural ability of the royal family. This ability was related to the life force nurtured by the sea, and it was related to the origin of all life on Earth from the sea. It could command all marine life, and it could infect and control the life in the sea, but this was only the insignificant performance of this ability. If the bloodline of the Neptune in this universe represented the power of the sea's origin of life, then Namo's bloodline represented the sea itself. Sacred Neptune could control the power of the sea and set off boundless tsunamis. Namo could command the water, manipulate the sea, set off tsunamis and waves, and when he was at his strongest, he could even create ocean currents. Sacred Neptune accumulated power from the movement of the sea. When this power erupted, it could drown islands, drown continents, and destroy everything. Now, Namo had combined sacred Neptune and Poseidon's steel with the Atlantis technology of this universe and the universe he was born in to create an unprecedented artifact of the sea, the real Neptune's trident. The platinum liquid metal was also liquid. As the trident cooled, an indescribable brilliance slowly appeared in the mold of the trident. As the trident completely solidified and came into contact with the seawater, a hidden wave receded from the Sahara with the tide. Namo rode this receding tide and returned to the sea. Neptune's trident emitted a wave that spread across the seven seas. All the marine life began to stir. In the Atlantis Sea Kingdom, the Atlantean warriors comforted their restless marine life mounts. Queen Mela was fidgeting on the throne. She called her confidant and asked him to go to the Alliance of Justice to find Neptune Arthur. However, she looked in the direction of the wave in a daze. This is the announcement of the birth of a new king of the sea. The sea can't have two kings. The sea. Have you also given up on Arthur? Mela knew that Arthur was not a qualified king. Compared to ruling his people, he preferred to drink with the sailors on land and play superhero games with the mainlanders. This made the foundation of his rule unstable. It was true that Mera governed Atlantis very well and had a group of solid supporters. However, Mela was the princess of the kingdom of Zebair, and the master of the seven seas could only be the royal family of Atlantis. Therefore, Mela chose to rely on Arthur's laws to rule the seven seas. However, Arthur himself lacked prestige, and Mela herself had flaws in her laws. Their rule might be stable, but it was not. Now, another king of the sea had issued his own declaration and challenge. This made Mela feel uneasy. She whispered, "Arthur, come back quickly. Your authority is being challenged." In the watchtower, the rough man, the Sea King, who was drinking wine, stared at his trident with a puzzled expression. Arthur grabbed the Neptune's trident, the divine weapon passed down from generation to generation of the Sea Tribe, and felt its uneasiness. He was going to inform Batman and return to Atlantis to take a look. Chapter 1204. Arthur, where are you? Mela was riding on a huge seahorse. Behind her, the warriors of Atlantis and the kingdom of Zebair were arranged in a strict battle formation, guarding outside the capital of Atlantis. They were facing a single enemy. "You're the Queen of Atlantis," Namor looked at Mela, whose red hair was fluttering in the sea. Her red hair floating in the water reminded him of some red algae swaying in the sea current. This was one of the few beautiful memories of his childhood. Unlike Arthur, Namor grew up in the sea. He didn't have a mainland father who taught him how to communicate and love. He also didn't feel that he was a child born from the love of his parents. Growing up in Atlantis, he was only instilled with hatred for the land and the sea. Growing up in an environment where he was discriminated against and regarded as a bastard, he was regarded as the descendant of a princess and a barbaric monkey on the land. It was equivalent to the mixed-race child of the president's daughter and a black man before the American Civil War. His heart was filled with hatred, extreme and arrogant. As a prince who was discriminated against because of his land bloodline, he hated mainlanders more than the average Atlantean. Perhaps it was because the Japanese were more brutal than the Japanese. That was why Namor hated the mainlanders and looked down on them from the bottom of his heart. He didn't have any feelings for his own people. Growing up in an environment of discrimination, how could he have any feelings for those who discriminated against him? His father was executed by his grandfather, the king of the old Atlantis. The only beautiful memory in his heart was the beauty and tolerance of the sea. Other than that, the only things that he valued were his royal bloodline and Atlantis itself. He loved Atlantis, but that kind of love was not for his compatriot. It was the love of a feudal king and a ruler for his own people. Just like how shepherds loved sheep, herders loved livestock, and horsemen loved horses. What he truly loved was the power that Atlantis had given him and the glory that came with this bloodline. That was why when Namor saw the beautiful Queen Mela, he was captivated by the charm of the sea and moved by her noble bloodline. Beauty and nobility were indispensable. Namor pointed his trident in Mela's direction and said in a low voice, "Daughter of the sea, you belong to the king of the sea. I will join hands with you to rule Atlantis. I have the noblest and most ancient bloodline. Even the ocean will submit to me. And you can rule Atlantis for me. Are you willing to abandon that ridiculous bastard who calls himself a king and surrender to me, the oldest and true king of Atlantis? Return to the forgotten glory of Atlantis?" Mela was infuriated by this arrogant challenge. A trace of disgust flashed in her eyes, but this woman was already a political creature. She urged the seahorse forward and said to Namor, "Stranger, you need to learn to respect the king of Atlantis. According to the sacred laws of the Seven Sea Kingdoms, Arthur and his bloodline are the only kings of the sea race, and they are revered by the seven seas. Other than the royal bloodline of Atlantis, no one else can rule the seven seas." Namor was infuriated by these words and laughed. He waved the trident in his hand and let the currents carry his voice across the battlefield and the capital of Atlantis. He said, "Stupid laws, ignorant and inferior bloodline. There is only one eternal royal family in Atlantis, and that is my family. Your so-called royal family is just a clown who stole the ruling position of Atlantis. Now that the true king of the sea has returned, your only way out is to submit to me." Namor was cold and arrogant. His words angered the entire Atlantis. The warriors under Mela's command were restless and glared at Namor angrily. However, Namor did not care about them. He stared at Mela with a passionate and greedy gaze. Obviously, he had a strong desire to conquer Mela. He knew that Mela's husband was Sea King Arthur, but so what? He, Namor, was the famous little prince of the Marvel Universe. He fought with other heroes far more often than he fought with villains. At the same time, he was also very interested in the wives of other heroes. That's right, Namor was a wife lover. His biggest hobby was to put hats on other heroes. If Mela was not married, Namor might not have been so interested. Sea King Arthur, who was rushing back to Atlantis, felt a green light flickering above his head. He felt his heart palpitate and unease. It seemed that something bad was happening. Even if Arthur racked his brains, He would never have guessed that someone from a neighboring universe would be eyeing his wife. It could only be said that the Atlanteans of both universes had similar aesthetic standard. Namor instantly discovered Melah's charm. Melah suppressed her dissatisfaction and disgust. Her pretty face darkened. She waved the trident in her hand and pointed it at Namor. "Stranger, you are challenging the authority of Atlantis and insulting our tradition." "Tradition? Ignorant people like you have forgotten about tradition," Namor said loudly. "Do you think that by tracing your history back to a ridiculous, usurping clown is your king? Why don't you think about the ancient times, when your glorious bloodline originated? Who was your ruler? With your advanced technology, powerful strength, and bloodline traditions, who did you submit to?" Namor shook the trident in his hand and transmitted his power and bloodline fluctuations to the seven seas. The mighty pressure made all the Atlanteans feel that they had encountered a higher existence. They were their natural rulers. Their bloodline was submitting to this aura. From their genes, they could not help but want to submit to the owner of this aura. Namor could sense these inferior bloodlines through their bloodline. It made them want to submit involuntarily from the bottom of their hearts. The Atlanteans, who had been ruled by the royal family for tens of thousands of years, naturally wanted to submit to nobles who were nobler than them. The rule of the nobles in Atlantis had reached a level where the bloodline ability of the commoners was fundamentally different from that of the nobles. The Atlanteans without the bloodline of the nobles did not even have the ability to breathe. These commoners believed that the nobles were born noble and ruling them was also natural. This was a sacred order since ancient times. Now these Atlanteans had tasted the consequences of their own actions. When Chun-Ong created Atlantis, he naturally would not create a new race. Since the Marvel Universe had the civilization of Atlantis, he could just transplant it over. The Atlanteans in the Marvel world also had the bad habit of installing a backdoor in their bloodline to establish the rule of bloodline. This time, the Atlanteans, who had even copied the genes of the Marvel world, met the royal family who installed a backdoor in their genes. One side was the king who had ruled for tens of thousands of years. The other side had installed a backdoor and a higher bloodline in their genes. When the two sides met, the commoners of Atlantis were in chaos. Mira also felt this oppressive aura and the impulse to submit from the depths of her bloodline. However, although the Atlanteans had been degrading and suppressing the bloodline of the commoners, they were also improving and optimizing their own genes. Therefore, the nobles who could breathe in the air were still resistant to the pressure of this bloodline. If they lost to the royal bloodline like Arthur, they would not even feel the pressure. However, in order to be superior, the nobles suppressed the genetic optimization of the commoners. This time, they had tasted the consequences. All the commoners facing Namor were bearing the pressure of facing a higher bloodline. They were in an uproar and confused for a moment. They subconsciously feared Namor and began to doubt who was the king of Atlantis. Mira tried her best to restrain her army and scolded, "People of Atlantis, are you going to believe a madman of unknown origin and doubt the royal family who has ruled Atlantis for tens of thousands of years?" Namor sneered, "Tens of thousands of years, how short and insignificant is that? The Atlanteans, those fake kings, have stolen the throne for tens of thousands of years. What about tens of thousands of years ago? The sea will prove my bloodline. The sea will prove who is the king of Atlantis." Mira led the allied forces of Atlantis and the kingdom of Zebair and began to move. Originally, Mira wanted to use communication to prove to the Atlanteans that this unfamiliar challenger was a usurper. However, this caused chaos among the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. The challenger seemed to be a royal as well. If two royal families were fighting for the throne, why should the commoners get involved? Of course, it was to support whoever was on the throne. Fortunately, the nobles who held power in Atlantis were still clear-headed. Their status as nobles was established by worshipping Arthur and the others who established the kingdom. So what if Namo was an ancient royal family? Did they contribute to the ancient royal family? Their status as nobles was conferred by the current royal family. Of course, they had to maintain the current royal family's status, following an ancient king. Unless Namo recognized their status and gave them more power, or supporting Namo would contribute. Mira made up her mind. She would not compromise. She wanted to destroy the opponent physically. When the mighty army rushed towards Namo, a mere challenger, Mira seemed to see Namo's face turning into ashes. However, Mira was not happy because she wanted to use bloodline to declare the rebel as a usurper, not to destroy him with violence. This was because the royal family did not use violence to rule Atlantis. Using violence to destroy the enemy was equivalent to admitting that using violence to overthrow the law of bloodline was reasonable. But even though the usurper who popped up out of nowhere seemed to possess the laws and principles of bloodline, and he seemed to be even more ancient than Arthur, this forced Mira to destroy him before the people could react, lest the foundation of her rule be shaken. Chapter 1205. Namo was alone in the face of the overwhelming army. He was as small as a bubble on the beach, pushed by the tide and broken by the waves. But he still stretched out his hand. In Namo's eyes, the coalition army of tens of thousands of people could only cover his field of vision, but when he stretched out his hand to block his line of sight, one hand could still occupy half of his field of vision. It was like that hand grabbing half of the army. But in the eyes of the coalition soldiers, their enemy was ridiculously small. They wavered for a moment, then became firm in an instant. How could such a small and ridiculous enemy be the king of Atlantis? However, what couldn't be seen in the sea was, the endless seawater converged into countless currents, like countless tentacles extending from Namo's body. These currents that extended from Namo's body spread into countless shadows that covered the sky and covered the earth. They were inconspicuous in the seawater, but if the seawater was plated with shadows, it would be impossible to see them. The currents that extended out like tentacles with Namo's small body as the center was a huge shadow that was dozens of times larger than the entire coalition army, surrounding the entire battlefield. Nobody knew what happened to the Atlanteans in the original Marvel Universe. Anyway, the Marvel Universe that Chun-Ong had magically modified had a new origin. After Messiah opened the portal to Earth, all the remaining civilizations in the mutant universe entered the Marvel Universe and became the new origin. Among them, Atlantis inherited the legacy of the original United States. They were called the Ancient Civilization, the Old Humans. Their level of technology and civilization had a cheat-like improvement. That Atlantis was also very different from the original Atlantis. Although the Atlantis of this universe was created by Chun-Ong using the materials of the previous universe, their level of civilization and technology was still a few grades lower than Namo's era. This could be seen from the fact that Atlantis had not yet gotten rid of the genetic restrictions of the previous universe. The Atlantis where Namo was located was an ancient civilization that dived into the sea to hide its development. After entering the sea, the Atlantis of the United States of the mutant universe also studied the development of controllable particles from the Republic. Because they were also crushed by the war Skynet that had evolved to the level of intelligent quark, they naturally knew the great potential of this technology to control basic matter. When they arrived at the Marvel Universe, they have been exploring in this direction. However, they didn't have the experience of being forced to develop like the Republic, and because they were wary of Skynet's similar abilities, they didn't make much progress. However, due to the incident at the Tower of Babel in Atlantis, they had no choice but to hide and sink into the ocean. Only then did the technology of controlling matter take a leap forward. This was because they did not have to find a way to install an AI system into an astronomical number of atoms that were terrifyingly small. All he needed to do was to control the majority of the large particles in the ocean, water molecules. The environment of Atlantis allowed them to develop their unique technology, water control technology. They could use electromagnetic waves to control the movement of water molecules. At the same time, they could also use energy to restrain the characteristics of water molecules, including, but not limited to, creating hardened water that was as hard as alloys and pure water molecular membranes with great tension. They could use energy to restrain water molecules and create ocean currents that were as hard and sharp as alloys, laser water currents that contained great energy and could emit energy currents, magnetized water currents that could superconduct electric currents, plasma currents that could contain large amounts of free electrons, and pure water defense shields with great surface tension. The trident in Namor's hand was a kind of water control technology weapon. Namor stretched out his hand toward the allied forces of the two kingdoms. Countless tiny ends of the ocean currents wrapped around his hand like silk threads. However, because of the transparent seawater, no one could see these formed water threads. They only saw Namor stretching out his hand like a fool, facing the huge army. Only Mela, who also had the ability to control water, felt an indescribably huge shadow expanding from Namor's body. She felt that a monster made of millions of tons of seawater was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws on the battlefield. Its huge size made her feel ridiculously small in front of it, and the core of that huge monster was Namor. Now, that terrifying monster stretched out its tentacles and instantly penetrated the formation of the soldiers. The soldiers of the Sea Kingdom did not notice it, but their enemies' tentacles were right beside them, sticking to their armor and hugging their mounts. The monster's tentacles were tied to the triggers of their energy guns. The monster's tentacles were tens of thousands of tons of seawater. In an instant, the tentacles split into the smallest ends that were only as thick as a strand of hair. Although Mera noticed this, the army was not like the seawater that she could control. She could control it freely when she released it, but it was very difficult to control the army when she released it. Those who could control it to the level of a small team were already masters of war. The Queen could only anxiously order the army to retreat, but it was too late. Namor's hand tightened slightly, and countless transparent tentacles of water rolled up everything they could grab. Water could become as hard as diamonds, or as sharp as alloy blades. It could conduct powerful electric currents, and the free electrons in the seawater could easily create electric currents that could electrocute all living things here. Namor only used the water to make it as tough as glue. He alone grabbed the throats of tens of thousands of soldiers. The Seafolk warriors felt their necks tighten, and they could only struggle in vain. Namor controlled the seawater to float, and sharp water currents appeared around everyone's body. As long as Namor willed it, they would be pierced through. Namor was like a terrifying monster that stretched out countless tentacles and lifted everyone up. He came to Mera and combed her beautiful red hair. He whispered into her ear, "Give the order to surrender, my queen." Mera used her ability to control water to dispel the water currents that choked her throat. She stabbed out with the dagger hidden in her sleeve. However, Namor only smiled as he looked at the dagger that was 1 millimeter away from his lower abdomen. There was an indestructible layer of diamond-like seawater on the surface of his body. Namor casually took the dagger from Mera's hand and combed her red hair behind her ear. He whispered into her ear, "Oh, red-haired girls are hot." In front of tens of thousands of people, Mera, who was close to Namor, showed a trace of shame and anger. However, her father, King Nereus, who had sent troops to support his daughter's power but was also captured, seemed to be very used to it. He put down the trident in his hand and bowed to Namor, indicating his surrender. Who knew what he was thinking? Perhaps it was out of habit that he also submitted to the strong. Or perhaps one daughter was bound to 3 kings. No matter how the power of the Sea Kingdom changed, I would not lose power. Wonderful. I, Nereus, will never sell my daughter. So sweet. The Sea King could be Amu or Arthur. Why can't it be Namor? Anyway, I'm the only father-in-law. Mera saw the current ruler of the Zebel Kingdom, her sister, the Siren, look at her. It was clear that she was saying, "You've hooked up with another one. Can't you change to a man who is not the Sea King? You bitch who rules Atlantis by changing men." Mira thought in despair, "I am loyal to Arthur." Namor hugged Mira, who he had personally put on the crown for, and sat on the throne of the Sea King. Facing the Atlanteans who refused to submit, he waved his right hand. With the throne as the center, the seawater receded in all directions like a tide. A huge whirlpool appeared on the surface of the sea, and it was getting bigger and bigger. The air was swallowed by the hollow whirlpool, forming a huge bubble that gradually enveloped the entire Atlantis. The residents of the capital, who were filled with air, struggled in the air like a dead fish. The Atlantean civilians clutched their throat. The civilians ran to places with water. The Atlantean warriors near the water wall at the edge of the capital desperately tried to put their heads into the water wall. But no matter what, they could not get any oxygen. This was because Namor had taken away their ability to get oxygen from the seawater. In front of the Atlanteans who were about to suffocate to death, Namor said coldly, "Look at you, noble Atlanteans, once you leave the seawater, you are like a lowly animal, unable to breathe at all. Even whales are higher than you. You used to come from the land, but you have lost the ability to step on land forever. You have become a lowly animal that can only live in the sea. There are even Atlanteans who have become irrational monsters. Do you still look like a noble Atlantean? Do you still deserve to be an Atlantean? You keep talking about the glory of your ancestors, but your ancestors were the kings who ruled the sea and the land. Until now, you have actually divided the sea and land with the monkeys who were once ruled by us. You have actually reached peace with the land. You have ceded the land of Atlantis since ancient times, ceded the territory above the sea, and turned yourself into a complete sea country. You have turned yourselves into sea people. Only the nobles can breathe on land. You no longer want to return to the land. Raise Atlantis to the surface of the sea. You will rule this planet forever. You have degenerated into lowly creatures, degenerated into a species of the same level as the land people. This is a mistake and a regression. Now your king is back." Namor waved his hand heavily and said, "I will make Atlantis great and glorious again. Forget that fake king. I will lead you to conquer this universe again." Namor walked in front of a struggling guard in the air and pointed the trident in his hand at him. The guard, who was born as a commoner, immediately felt a cool air enter his lungs. He panted a few times and actually stood up again. He looked at his body, touched it, and found that he could already breathe in the air. The guard shed tears of joy and knelt in front of Namor. He said enthusiastically, "You are the only king of Atlantis, my majesty." Wherever Namor's trident pointed, all the Atlanteans gained the ability to breathe in the air. More and more Atlanteans crowded around him and knelt in front of him. Under the fanatical support of countless people, Namor was crowned the Sea King of Atlantis. He held Melah's hand and sat on the throne together. Looking at the familiar queen, the last part of the stubborn Atlantean commoners also gave up resisting. Melah sat next to Namor as if she was sitting on pins and needles. However, when the people of the Seven Seas bowed down to her, she seemed to have regained her former power. Melah gradually relaxed. Although she still had the idea of helping Arthur defeat Namor, she had learned to endure humiliation. "Arthur, I will hide beside that arrogant king and wait for your return," Melah thought. How nice. Namor arrived at the Trench Kingdom under the watchful eyes of tens of thousands of people. Countless monsters swarmed towards him like a tidal wave. Facing the densely packed monsters, Namor pointed his trident forward. The monster that was charging at the forefront began to tremble violently. Its scales, claws, and teeth began to shed their skin. Soon, a merfolk with some of the characteristics of a monster appeared in front of the warriors. However, its eyes were clear now. The sea person looked at Namor in confusion. Behind him, countless Trench tribe people were transforming. The Trench Tribe person who was the first to transform was stunned for a while. Finally, he looked back at his people who were transforming and knelt in front of Namor. Namor placed the trident on his shoulder. Return, my people. I will bestow upon you the glory and great bloodline. You will no longer be monsters. You will become a true Atlantean. You will repay me with loyalty. I will bestow upon you the name Arthur. You will be the king of the Trench Tribe. Countless Atlanteans cheered and surrendered to Namor together with the new Trench Tribe people. On the second day, when the news reached the Merfolk Kingdom and the Saltwater Kingdom, the two tribes surrendered. Now, the 6 seas had surrendered to Namor. Other than the extinct mysterious sea nation, the 7 seas had been conquered by Namor. Namor became the second king of Atlantis in this universe to unify the 7 seas. Mera accompanied Namor to inspect the 2 newly surrendered sea nations, the Saltwater Kingdom, the Crustacean Kingdom, and the Merfolk Kingdom. Under Namor's manipulation of the Atlantean technology, the Merfolk gradually returned to the original appearance of the Atlanteans. They looked very similar to the land humans. Faced with Atlantis that had unified the 7 seas, Mera and Namor used skillful diplomatic methods to appease the new Atlantean people. She also used the old way to convince herself to endure humiliation and enjoy the happiness that power brought to her. At the same time, she used the unification of Atlantis as an excuse to accept Namor's marriage proposal without hesitation. Arthur, who was on his way here, wore a shiny green hat. I will leave a unified Atlantis for Arthur, Mera thought. She enjoyed a wider range of power. How nice, Mera thought as she endured humiliation. How nice. King Nereus, the ruler of the kingdom, patrolled his more powerful army while looking forward to conquering the land. How nice. Princess Siren looked at her sister, the new queen of Atlantis, with jealousy. She sighed and said, I betrayed the Sea King, I schemed, I desired power, but I know I'm a good girl. A real whore likes to pretend to be innocent, pure, and forced to endure humiliation. She pretends to love a man and pretends to surrender to another man. My betrayal is obvious, but her betrayal seems to be forced. But men are shallow. They only look at the surface and fall for this trick. So, they can only miss out on a good girl and get tricked into the position of queen by a whore. Only women can tell who the King real B TCH is. Without a doubt, my sister is such a B TCH. Then, Siren set off to look for Arthur. She had to tell Arthur what happened in the sea. Then, she would snatch him back from her B TCH sister. Chapter 1206. The Sea King returned to the lighthouse where his father used to work. It was not that he was not in a hurry to go back to see Mela, but he felt a subtle discomfort when he entered the sea. It was as if the entire sea was hostile to him. Furthermore, his friends, the whales and dolphins in the sea, also told him through their telepathic connection that Atlantis had changed. Arthur was a rough man. His hobbies were drinking, swimming, and perming his hair. His long, wavy hair, tattoos, and unruly beard were all his true love. Other than the responsibilities left behind by Mela and his mother, there was nothing else worthy of his nostalgia in the sea. Even Mela could not make him stay. Therefore, Arthur abandoned his huge foundation and happily came to the land to devote himself to his superhero career. Although the people on the land had always questioned his position in the Justice and Order Alliance, everyone generally thought that the Sea King was rough, rude, ignorant, brainless, and had no superpowers. What was the point of talking to a fish? Batman could not fight, but he had brains. And money. Superman was handsome and good at fighting. He had saved the world several times. These two were recognized as the leaders of the Justice and Order Alliance. They had the highest number of fans in the entire alliance. There was also Wonder Woman, those long legs and that woman. Men liked the face of the Justice and Order Alliance, and women were happy to see Wonder Woman represent women's right. The Flash was cute, shy, and warm. He was also the conscience of the Justice and Order Alliance, and his affinity was the max. Although Steel Bones was a little useless, he was responsible for the technical support and logistics of the Justice and Order Alliance. He carried Google with him and had the ultimate skill of opening a teleportation channel. Most importantly, he could ride on the popularity of Iron Man next door. He could not possibly not have a character that copied the popular hero next door. What did the Sea King have? If Arthur could break the fourth wall, he would definitely be able to shake. He laughed crudely and said, "I am now the face of the popularity of the Justice and Order Alliance's solo movie. Wonder Woman is still okay, but Batman and Superman are so popular that I can't even find their shadows. Who knows when someone else will be replaced? Who else? Who else is better than me?" But he could not. In front of the lighthouse, Arthur came to his father's grave. He killed Black Manta Ray's father, so Black Manta Ray also gave him a painful revenge. That's why people said that the Sea King wasn't powerful. It could be seen from the villains. Black Manta Ray couldn't even be compared to the Super Bat second-rate villains like Poison Ivy Woman, Clown Girl, Bane, Mechanical Superman, and General Zwoda, let alone the Clown and Luthor. The strength of a hero lies in the villain who is his enemy. Arthur's greatest enemy is actually such a third-tier villain. One could only imagine his own status. The Black Manta Ray was thrown to the ground by Namor. Namor looked down at him from above and said coldly, "This is the enemy that the clown has been fighting with for so long. How surprisingly weak." He crushed the Black Manta Ray's mask with his feet. The two huge eyes on the Black Manta Ray's armor shot out a high-intensity energy beam that struck the soles of Namor's feet. Not even the soles of his shoes were scratched. Namor crushed the mask. The broken pieces were stepped on by his feet and pierced into the Black Manta Ray's face. Namor didn't even have the mood to look at him. The Black Manta Ray felt extremely humiliated. At this moment, his hatred for Namor had far exceeded his hatred for Arthur. It became an eternal wound in the Black Manta Ray's heart. Namor exerted a little force with his feet, and the Black Manta Ray's skull creaked as if it couldn't bear the weight. Namor turned to Mela and said, "Your false king can't even defeat a stupid, lowly, and weak mortal. How can you treat such a weak thing as your king?" He looked back at all the Atlantean warriors and roared, "This is your enemy, your king's enemy? Is this worthy of being the enemy of the great Atlantis?" The Atlantean warriors lowered their heads in shame. They couldn't help but think to themselves, that mainlander called Black Manta Ray is so weak, but he still became a big problem for the Sea King. Is the Sea King really worthy to be the king of Atlantis? The discrimination against mainlanders made them feel that the glory of Atlantis had been offended. Namor made all the Atlanteans understand through a simple comparison that he was a greater king than Arthur. His power was far greater than Arthur's. His power, glory, determination, and bloodline had completely overwhelmed the land bastard who had tarnished the bloodline of Atlantis. Namor hid his identity as a mixed blood of land and sea. He was satisfied to see the disdain and hatred for Arthur in the eyes of the warriors of the Seven Seas. A tyrant could satisfy the ambitions, intentions, desires, and long-accumulated dissatisfaction of the people of a long-lost country better than a Virgin Mary. Namor raised his trident and roared. The Sea Clan warriors followed suit and roared. Looking at their king, he smashed the lowly head under his feet while laughing wildly, crushing the hateful eyes of the Black Manta Ray into flesh and blood. The body of the Black Manta Ray that had lost its head briefly struggled for 2 seconds before it completely stopped moving. Mela accompanied Namor by his side. Looking at the fanatical emotions of the Atlanteans around her, she felt deeply uneasy and uncomfortable. Only the lower class and the upper class who longed for military achievements and promotion would support the war. However, those who longed for war and really benefited from peace, the original rulers, were actually more afraid of the arrival of war than ordinary people because war might take away everything they had. Those who obtained military achievements, those soldiers, and those who supported the war, of course, needed some benefits that were plundered from the outside, but there was also a portion that came from squeezing their vested interests. Namo looked at the people that he had gained a preliminary understanding of, and was very satisfied with this gift from his allies. He seemed to inadvertently glance at the red-haired queen beside him. Of course, he knew some of Melah's little tricks, but Namo, who was very satisfied with the red-haired queen, did not care about these things. He felt that the process of conquering a woman was the greatest manifestation of his masculine charm. He would destroy that woman's little tricks and clean up those restless Atlantean nobles to conquer Melah. He would make her acknowledge him and completely forget about that failure of a trash. Arthur walked on the small dock that came with the lighthouse and walked along the trestle to the end of the dock that extended into the sea. He recalled the vague memories of his youth. At that time, his parents would hug each other in the morning and dusk and bring him here to watch the sun sink into the sea level or jump out of the sea level. Time was quiet and beautiful. When it came to his teenage years, the lovers who hugged each other at the dock disappeared. Only his father's lonely figure was left. He would still walk to the dock every morning and every day, waiting for something there. Later, after Arthur defeated his ambitious younger brother and became the Sea King, there was another short period of happiness. However, happiness always disappeared so quickly that most of the time, he was waiting. Arthur looked at the calm sea. His mother died because of his younger brother's rebellion, and his father was killed by the black manta rays. His father asked Arthur to scatter his ashes into the sea so that his soul could merge with his wife in the sea. Therefore, whenever he missed his father, Arthur could only come to this familiar sea and quietly reminisce. After gaining enough courage from these memories, Arthur finally stood up again. It was time to take the trident back to face everything. When he turned his head, he saw a familiar figure standing at the spot where his mother had landed. That familiar purple hair and a face that was extremely similar to Melah's made Arthur surprised. Hela. Hela was the original name of the siren. This evil mermaid could use her voice to sleep men and make them do anything for her. She came to Arthur's side and placed her two soft hands on Arthur's shoulders. Her body that was as flexible as kelp clung to Arthur. Arthur, who had already ruined the siren's plans several times, would certainly not be hypnotized by this mermaid. However, if the siren wanted to talk to a man, there were not many people in this world who could refuse. "Why are you still missing my sister? You men are so cheap. What's there to miss about that kind of woman?" Arthur's trident pressed on the siren's shoulder. He said coldly, "Hela, Melah is 10 times better than you. Be it charm or other things." The siren's face twisted for a moment, but she immediately smiled. "You trust her so much. Is she worthy of your trust? You gave her the entire kingdom. Is she worthy of your trust? What do you want to say?" Arthur said impatiently. He was a rough person and did not like to listen to these meaningless words. The siren also knew that he was impatient, so she simply said, "Arthur, you still don't know anything. You should have felt the restlessness and uneasiness from Neptune's trident. This weapon from the dead king is the symbol of the power of the Atlantean Sea. Its uneasiness indicates that there is a new challenger for power in the sea. Arthur, you are no longer the only Sea King." "You mean, am you?" Arthur frowned and said, "What kind of trouble did he get himself into again? This time it is not Amu. Compared to that man, Amu is just a child who has not yet matured. He is ambitious, but he is far from that, evil." The siren put her chin on Arthur's shoulder and said, "Not long ago, a new Sea King challenged Atlantis. He claimed to be from before the history of Atlantis and was the king of the lost history. He showed his noble bloodline, great power, and the authority to control the entire sea. The Atlantean army could not withstand a single blow from him. My sister, Mira, was easily captured by him. Whether it was her body or her soul, That man took Atlantis under his command and became the new Sea King who unified the seven seas. He also conquered the Trench tribe, the Fisherman Kingdom, and the Saltwater Kingdom. My father, King Nereus, was convinced by his strength and gave up the kingdom of Zabeel. He also made my sister the Queen of Atlantis. But this time, the king is not you. What? Arthur said in disbelief. You are slandering Mira. The siren cleverly hid the mental fluctuations that she used to induce Arthur in her voice. She projected the scenes that she had seen not long ago into Arthur's mental world. Suddenly, the green light above Arthur's head made him helpless. Fortunately, Arthur was the child of an American man. He grew up with a deep understanding of American culture, and was more open-minded about this. If he was a real Atlantean, of course, he would not be able to tolerate it. The stepfather that Arthur's mother found for him was because he could not tolerate it. He had always wanted to kill Arthur, this bastard. But Americans, they would get used to it. Isn't it just because my wife has a lover? And she wants to divorce me? The specific situation is still unclear. Even after the divorce, she has not given birth to someone else's child. Even if she has a child, she did not ask me to raise it. Even if I help raise Old Wang's child, at least she might still love me. Even if she divorced, married someone else, and stole my throne, there is still a possibility that she will change her mind. If I want to live a good life, I have to be cuckolded. The siren looked at Arthur, who was in great pain but had begun to forgive Mira. She sneered silently in her heart, "Heh? A man." The intelligence that the siren gave to Arthur had been verified by communicating with the intelligent creatures in the sea. Generally speaking, it was not bad. Arthur wanted to go back to challenge and regain his Sea King position and his wife. But the siren stopped him. The siren leaned against Arthur's chest and said, "Now you are far from his opponent. Although Neptune's trident is powerful and the symbol of the Atlantean royal power, Namor's Atlantean technology is more advanced than ours. Neptune's trident is no match for his recast Neptune's trident. You need a more powerful weapon to challenge him." Arthur's right hand was skillfully placed on Siren's waist. In addition to being good at forgiving and accepting their women's promiscuity, Americans were also very good at accepting their own promiscuity. Especially after his girlfriend cheated on him, Arthur did not feel guilty at all for hooking up with his sister-in-law. Chaotic emotional relationships had almost become the standard of superheroes. After marrying Mira, Arthur rarely hooked up with other women. The current situation was a little exciting. It was like changing sex. Arthur was not afraid to release his hormones. He thought for a moment and said, "A weapon more powerful than Neptune's trident. I seem to have heard of it in my mother's bedtime story?" The siren leaned against Arthur's chest and laughed. "Poseidon's trident. Coincidentally, I also heard of it in the Queen's bedtime story when she adopted my sister." The siren continued to advise Arthur, "And we still need help from one person." Who? Arthur was not good at using his brain. The siren said her ex-boyfriend's name, Amu. It's impossible. Arthur just wanted to say something but was stopped by the siren. Now Amu will only be your most steadfast ally. He will hate Namor more than you. Compared to you, he and Namor will be even more irreconcilable. You are brothers. Arthur, Amu cares more about Atlantis than you. He cares about the royal family. If he knows that someone has usurped the royal position, he will go crazy," Arthur said with lingering fear. Brothers fighting each other to defend themselves. The siren put her hand on Arthur's chest and stroked his unrestrained chest hair. She bit her lip and showed a charming expression. "Now is the time for you to join hands. Do you want to call your friends from the Alliance of Justice and Justice?" Arthur looked conflicted for a while, but he still shook his head and said, "This is Atlantis' own business. It should not be taken outside to solve it." "Then you should at least tell them, because I suspect that Namor's incident may not be an isolated incident. It may be part of a huge conspiracy." Chapter 1207. Under Siren's persuasion, Arthur still called Batman. "Batty, I need you to do me a favor." Arthur was a little embarrassed. Something happened in Atlantis. A sea man who calls himself Namor seized the throne while I was away and imprisoned Mira. He seems to be starting a war to conquer the land again. Yes, this time it's not for revenge, but for conquest. I know you want to help, but Batty, this is Atlantis business. I have to solve it myself. Batman's voice was hoarse on the other side of the phone. No, Arthur. This is no longer just about you. Shazan was killed, and the Eagle Man and Eagle Girl were also killed. Those people are hiding in the shadows and attacking the members of the League of Justice and Order one by one. Isn't the purpose of our alliance to deal with emergencies that we can't deal with alone? Some people are hiding in the dark, planning to eradicate the League of Justice and Order, the shield that protects Earth. Arthur was a little persuaded, but he still stubbornly said, "What the League has to do now is to prepare for war. The atrocities of the usurper named Namor are Atlantis' internal affairs. I can't get the League involved. I have to try to take back the throne now and stop his crazy behavior. But if I fail, you can make your move." Arthur made his own request. "Namor is challenging the entire royal family. I need my brother's help. Batty, contact the Heavenly Eye Association. I'm going to Bellevue Prison to talk to him. Release AMU?" Batman thought for a second. "That's a good idea. I'll give you a chance to solve the problem, but once things start to get out of control, I'll immediately take action. At that time, I won't consider your opinion," Arthur said. "You don't have to consider my opinion, because I'll be dead by then." Arthur hung up the phone and expressed his determination to defend Atlantis with his life. Batman was silent for a while and whispered, "That's why I'm worried." Bellevue Prison was located in the Gulf of Mexico, surrounded by swamps. The most notorious criminals in the United States were imprisoned here. No one would escape from prison, because everyone knew that outside the prison, it was King Hell. Poisonous miasma, crocodiles, insects, and the seemingly safe land, but when you stepped on it, the swamps would swallow you at any time. In comparison, Bellevue Prison was King Paradise. No one would leave heaven and escape to hell. Arthur's younger brother, the Ocean Lord Amu, was imprisoned here. Although it was a little strange to imprison an Atlantean in a prison where the greatest danger was the swamp, Amu was still imprisoned for a few years. The Heavenly Eye Association was responsible for guarding the most dangerous mortals here. The middle-aged woman named Amanda had even formed a special team of the most dangerous criminals to carry out dangerous missions. This plan, called the Suicide Team, was already on track, but Amu was not someone Amanda could touch. Although he had been exiled to the human world, he was still the Prince of Atlantis. Amanda hated this kind of person with a special background, someone she didn't even dare to touch. In fact, Amu's treatment was quite good. Perhaps the U.S. government was prepared to help this prince return to the throne when necessary to gain the support of Atlantis? The U.S. government was very good at making bets on both sides. Although Amu was a criminal now, he could change at any time and become the leader of the Atlantean anti-government army supported by the U.S. He could go back and fight to the death with the legitimate Sea King Arthur. It was not just the U.S. Perhaps even Batman had such a plan to counter Arthur. Arthur stood outside Amu's prison. Seeing that his brother's prison was simple and comfortable, Arthur breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at his thin and disheveled brother, a trace of guilt and sadness flashed in Arthur's eyes. In fact, he did not want to lock his brother up, even though Amu had killed their mother. However, Arthur believed that Amu was also suffering because of this. If he was locked up here obediently, it might not mean that he did not have a sense of self-exile. "He's the only family I have," Arthur said gloomily. Siren looked at her ex-boyfriend with a slightly unnatural expression, but Siren was dismissive of Arthur's entanglement. "Weak man! Open it!" Arthur said to Avatar. Avatar straightened her neck and said, "You need to protect yourself. He is a very dangerous criminal." "You can't," I said, "open it," Arthur said angrily. He looked coldly at the woman he hated and emphasized every word. "And he is not a criminal. He is the Prince of Atlantis who was exiled to the human world. He is my brother." Avatar screamed like a woman whose skirt had been lifted. "You should know how many people he killed. How many innocent people were killed by the tsunami he caused. He committed a crime against the U.S. government. The U.S. government also committed a lot of crimes against Atlantis. You slaughtered whales and dolphins, dumped sewage into the ocean, and overharvested, destroying the ecology of the ocean. What you did to Atlantis could have caused a war. My brother, although he made a mistake, when it comes to our two countries, we don't owe each other anything." When Amu heard what Arthur said for him, he raised his head in shock. Avatar was trembling with anger, but she could not say anything. Arthur looked at his brother and continued, "Of course Amu made a mistake, but he only made a mistake against Atlantis and the people on land. He started a war that involved innocent people. He is guilty against the people on land and sea. But this war was not started by us alone. Amu paid the price, but the US and all the countries on land did not. I feel deeply remorseful for the innocent people who died in the war, but for the politicians who caused this, your government, I don't feel remorseful. You should atone for the crimes you committed against the sea. If Amu is guilty, then all of you are unforgivable." Arthur said coldly to Avatar, "Now open this thing that's holding my brother." Avatar opened her mouth silently. Her lips wriggled, but she obediently remained silent. She could speak rudely to Batman, she could despise and make things difficult for Superman, but she did not dare do anything to Arthur. That was because Amu was the leader of a country stronger than the US. To put it bluntly, Avatar was a dog raised by the US government. She had no right to criticize America's diplomatic interests. In the past, Arthur did not have the self-awareness of being the leader of a country with the same status as the US, so he was more approachable and tolerant. Arthur did not see himself as the Sea King of Atlantis. He saw himself as a superhero who protected Earth. Superheroes could only endure the confusion and blame of the people. However, if he was the king of Atlantis, the Sea King, then his dignity would not be violated by anyone. The consequences would be like the heads of other countries being insulted by the US when they visited. Not only would it be extremely impolite in diplomacy, but it would also be equivalent to insulting the entire Atlantis. It might even lead to a war. Avatar obediently opened the cell door, and Arthur walked in. Amu sneered. "Isn't this my bastard brother? Why are you finally in the mood to see your poor, imprisoned brother? Amu! Atlantis is in trouble. We need you," Arthur said painfully. Amu's expression suddenly changed. "So, you played your superhero game on land, ignoring your responsibilities and throwing your people to the back of your mind, until that shameful usurper trampled on our country?" Amu trembled with anger. He looked at Arthur with bloodshot eyes. He regarded Atlantis as his life, but the person in front of him had trampled on his life so easily. Arthur said guiltily, "Mela managed Atlantis very well. But she is from the Zabir kingdom. We are the only kings recognized by the Seven Seas. Look at what you have done to Atlantis." Amu roared. "So?" Arthur admitted his mistake. "We need you to come back. Bring me my trident." Amu looked into Arthur's eyes and said firmly. While Amu was putting on his armor, the siren pulled Arthur to the side and whispered, "Arthur, you can't admit that you are the cause of all this. Although Amu will help you now, once everything is over, he will immediately turn against you and take back his throne. You must be careful, Arthur reflected on himself. Maybe I'm not a qualified Sea King. I handed everything to Mela, thinking that she would do it well. But I've actually been avoiding my own responsibilities. Maybe Amu will be a better king than me. Arthur said, now that the war is over, maybe it is time to put everything back on track. He loves Atlantis more than I do, and he can think from Atlantis' point of view. The siren was dumbfounded. It was not easy for me to seduce my brother-in-law while my sister was having an affair, and now you want to give the throne to Amu? Speaking of which, Amu is not bad. I used to have an affair with him. I want to be in power. Leave Atlantis to me and go to the shore to play. If the Sea King is replaced by the power-mad Amu, what can I do? I might as well go back to the Zabir kingdom and play by myself. Amu carried his trident and walked out of the prison. He was in high spirits as he looked at Arthur and the other man. The two tridents crisscrossed, like two brothers clasping their hands together. They were united again. Let's go find Poseidon's trident, Amu said. I know where it is. The siren saw that Arthur agreed without hesitation, and her heart tightened. I found Poseidon's trident for you. Amu wants to get his own trident and master more power than you. Do you know that? Now it's Amu with the trident. Don't you feel that something is wrong? Batman looked at the location on Arthur's phone. He was ready to let Barry strike at the right time. Now was not the time to let Arthur do whatever he wanted. First, he would observe Namor's intelligence through Arthur and his brother. Then, he would come up with a plan to let Barry help them at the critical moment to defeat Namor. Then, he would plot against Amu and lock him up again. Batman had already obtained all the intelligence on Amu. Plotting against him was as easy as drinking water. The only worry was that Arthur would turn against him. However, Batman had a special weapon against Arthur. When the time came, he would let Mela deal with him. Mela was the last person who wanted to see Amu rule, and Arthur could not do anything to his wife. Atlantis could not be controlled by an ambitious person like Amu. A sweet and naive person like Arthur was the best candidate. Otherwise, Batman could not imagine what the next war between the land and sea would be like. He knew that the conflicts between the land and sea had never stopped. There would always be small conflicts that would turn into big conflicts, and then the day of war would come. Just the fact that a dolphin had been killed, and it was the pet of an Atlantean child, and the Atlanteans treated the dolphin as a friend, would cause the Atlanteans to hate the land. They would demand revenge for the dolphin, and then there would be evidence of humans polluting the sea and killing marine life. The Atlanteans would be in an uproar. The most troublesome thing was that these things were not fake. They were happening all the time. If Atlantis was not in the hands of the right person, the peace between the land and sea would be as fragile as a piece of paper. Chapter 1208. The Sea King Dragon swooped down, its body gliding over the luminous seaweed of Atlantis. Amu held his trident and looked at the endless flow of fluorescent currents in front of him, as well as the miraculous bridge. The trident in his hand was gilded, and the main trident was inlaid with a sapphire that glowed blue like the sea. The two auxiliary tridents extended from both sides like the limbs of a crab. The overall design was even more domineering than Neptune's trident. It was indeed the weapon of the sea god Poseidon. Not to mention its power, just its appearance alone was extraordinary. We can only enter Atlantis from here. Arthur waved his trident and said happily, Mela will arrange for someone to bring us in. Mela? Amu turned his head in disdain. Do you only know how to listen to women's arrangements? Arthur, who had just contacted Mela, was extremely excited that Mela had not betrayed him. Amu glanced at his stupid brother and sneered. He turned his head in disdain. He actually thought that such a slave to his wife would threaten his throne. Amu felt that he was not worthy. Arthur was just an idiot who was controlled by Mela. He stood up to challenge and seize the throne of Atlantis because he was controlled by that woman. Amu felt that he was not worthy. He actually had such a brainless and ambitious brother who allowed a woman to control the throne that should have belonged to his family. I already have Poseidon's trident, so we don't need to be secretive. Nemo openly challenged the army of Atlantis and seized the throne. So don't be so petty. Just like how I did in the past, I gave you a chance and then defeated you in front of all the Atlanteans instead of sneaking around like a thief. The throne that was seized in this way was also stolen. Amu rode the Sea King Dragon to the front of the palace. He raised Poseidon's trident and roared, "Usurper! I, Amu of the royal family, accept your challenge. We will not rest until one of us is dead." Amu's roar reverberated throughout the entire king's city. Namor, who was sitting on the throne, suddenly laughed. He waved his hand at the soldiers who were waiting for the two brothers to walk into the trap and laugh. "It seems that I have underestimated them. Your laughable snitching seems to be of no use." Namor glanced at the nobles who came to snitch on him. His contempt for them was obvious. Namor picked up his trident and put on his armor. He was ready to face the last two leftovers under his rule. Sitting beside him, Melah's face was pale. Namor had called her over just now to admire the ugliness of the Atlantean nobles who swore loyalty to her and came forward to inform on her one after another. This was a fatal blow to Melah's confidence. She didn't expect that Namor had only ruled Atlantis for less than a month before completely destroying the prestige that she had built up throughout her life. Her rule over Atlantis was such a failure. As soon as Namor stood up, the new chief of the Trench tribe, another Arthur, knelt down and pleaded, "Your Majesty, please allow me, your loyal subject, to lead the warriors of the Trench tribe to kill those two lowly challengers. They are not fit to challenge you." Namor looked into the eyes of the chief of the Trench tribe, which were filled with the flames of vengeance, and agreed to his request. Dozens of Trench tribe warriors followed behind their chief and swam out of the king's city. They gripped the harpoons in their hands tightly. Their hatred for Arthur and the others was unforgettable. The Trench tribe warriors came in front of Amu and Arthur. Amu looked at the ferocious-looking, unfamiliar warriors of the Sea Nation and frowned. "Who are you? Where is Namor? Does he not dare to accept our challenge?" "You are not fit to challenge the king," the chief of the Trench tribe said angrily. "Hypocrites, usurpers, people who tamper with history, people who have the bloodline of a false king." He pointed at the two brothers, Amu and Arthur, and roared, "Atlantis lied to us. He told us that his family was the ruler of the seven seas and would lead Atlantis to become a powerful king. However, Atlantis was thousands of times stronger before him. We were ruled by King Namor's family. You are just clowns who have stolen the throne." Atlantis claimed that Atlantis would control an eternal and inexhaustible energy source and make Atlantis the greatest country in the world. In the end, he brought disaster to us. He turned us into this. The chief of the Trench tribe raised his hands that were covered in bone spurs and scales. He pointed at the people of the Saltwater Kingdom who were covered in shells. He looked into the distance at the ruined desert kingdom. He looked at the fishermen who had turned into fishmen. "Only you Atlanteans have become more beautiful and powerful. We have all become monsters," the chief of the Trench tribe roared. Arthur was surprised. "You are from the Trench tribe? How did we return to our original state?" The chief of the Trench tribe helped him finish the sentence. He laughed maniacally. He pointed at the saltwater kingdom that had begun to shed its shells, the fisherman's kingdom that was changing into a human form, and the desert kingdom that was preparing to recover. It was the great King Namor who restored the glory of Atlantis. When you informed us, Atlantis turned its own people into monsters, banished them, and exiled their own people to form another kingdom. You banished us out of Atlantis and proclaimed yourselves as the only Atlanteans. However, I, King Namor, accepted all the tribes that you've expelled, the tribes that you've turned into monsters, the tribes that you've tortured until they lost their rationality and civilization, and the tribes that you've allowed to perish as Atlanteans. We have returned to the appearance of our ancestors. Long live King Namor! The chief of the Trench tribe raised his harpoon and shouted. The warriors of the Trench tribe behind him roared in unison, Long live King Namor! Countless warriors of the Saltwater Kingdom and the Fisherman's Kingdom cheered in unison, Long live King Namor! Only the warriors of Atlantis looked at the two sea kings with complicated expressions. Arthur did not know what to say. His worldview began to conflict. He had thought that he would receive the cheers of his subjects when he came here. Then, he would expel the tyrant and restore the freedom of Atlantis. But now, his people were cheering for the enemy. This made it difficult for him to distinguish whether what he did was right or a mistake made by a tyrant in order to regain his rule. His hand that was tightly gripping the trident loosened. He was at a loss. Facing the roars of the Trench tribe and their accusations, Arthur did not dare to say that he had a clear conscience. The chief of the Trench tribe roared, You only treated us as tools of war. Ignorant beast! It was King Namor who turned us into Atlanteans. If you want to challenge the king, you will have to do it over our dead bodies. Amu was not as confused as his brother Arthur. As a tyrant, he was very clear about his position. I am Atlantis. I am the country. Atlantis has left its family. It is meaningless. He pointed Poseidon's trident forward and snorted. Rebels, die. The trident pierced into the formation of the warriors of the Trench tribe. It pierced through a warrior like a spear fish. Then, it pierced through the chest of another warrior behind him. Amu rode the Sea King Dragon into the crowd of the Trench tribe. The Sea King Dragon's big mouth bit towards the chief of the Trench tribe. The chief of the Trench tribe flipped down and avoided the Sea King Dragon's bite. However, the warriors behind him were smashed into pieces by the Sea King Dragon's big mouth. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, forming a bright flower of blood in the sea. Amu pulled out his trident and casually stabbed it. It created a huge undercurrent in the sea, causing the warriors of the Trench tribe to lose their footing. Then, the trident rose and fell, piercing them one by one under their mount. He created a huge undercurrent, and together with the Sea King Dragon, they crashed into the wall of the Atlantean capital. The surging undercurrent made the warriors on the wall lose their footing, causing them to lose their footing. Amu shouted angrily behind him, Arthur! Hearing this, Arthur could only put these thoughts to the back of his mind and focus on the battle. He raised the trident in his hand, and an invisible spiritual wave spread out. With the surging of the undercurrent, the entire Atlantean capital seemed to shake. A huge pincer pierced through the ground and inserted itself into the walls of Atlantis. A huge monster broke through the ground and arrived in front of the capital. The ballistae on the city wall hit its body, but they only tickled it. Its body was about the size of the capital. It was the most terrifying giant beast in the deep sea, the monster tamed by Arthur's family, Kulasen. Amu controlled the water and grabbed the chief of the Trench tribe by the throat. He pulled it to his side. He raised his trident and was about to stab it in the head. Just as he was about to demonstrate to the traders in the city, a lonely figure appeared on the city wall. He held a trident and wore a black fish skin coat. His black hair swayed in the sea. Namo threw his trident, and Poseidon's trident collided heavily with Amu's. Amu felt an unparalleled force coming from his arms. He gripped the trident tightly, but his entire body, along with the Sea King Dragon, was pushed back a short distance. He quietly released his numb hands and stared at the person who had come. "Let go of my subjects," Namo said coldly. "If you want to die, I will grant you death. If you want despair, I will bring you despair." Shameless boasting. Amu snorted coldly and rushed forward. Namo held Poseidon's trident and prepared to control the water. He did not expect that Poseidon's trident in Amu's hand would also emit a wave that destroyed Namo's ability to control the water. That wave was not as strong as Namo's, but if it was used to interfere, it would cause Namo to be unable to control the sea normally. "So, you have something to rely on. That's why you dare to come and die? Namo did not care. He controlled Atlantis using water molecular control technology. However, if anyone thought that Atlantis technology only had water molecular control and shaping technology, or that Namo only relied on Atlantis technology, then they would be in deep trouble. Chapter 1209. Out of fear of the apocalypse, Atlantis had invested a lot of energy in scientific research projects to study the strengthening of individual strength. Of course, the final results were useless in the face of the increasingly abnormal apocalypse. However, this did not mean that these technologies were meaningless. In addition to genetic modification, the Atlanteans had also developed several sets of external methods to strengthen themselves using technology. Just like Iron Man wearing steel armor, the Atlanteans had been living in the water ever since the Tower of Babel incident. Of course, they had also developed a few sets of exoskeletons, or technological martial arts, that used water as a medium to strengthen their faces. Ancient Snake Chin Ang's scientific martial arts, high-tech martial arts, and mutated martial arts, supernatural martial arts, had caused a lot of disasters. The shadow of the apocalypse had allowed Ancient Snake's martial arts concepts to be carried forward even after his death. Ancient Snake's martial arts concept was very simple. Martial arts was to use all external and internal conditions to create a method of strength. Science was the fundamental way of martial arts. All martial arts could be translated into science, and all science could be translated into martial arts. Martial arts was a more scientific use of strength. Therefore, Atlantis Water Exoskeleton, which was a specially modified water molecular pressure conduction exoskeleton, could also be called Atlantis Technological Martial Arts Secret Book. 10 billion tons of water pressure. The principle of this technological martial arts was very simple. It was no different from a large hydraulic press. It used the natural law of pressure conduction to reduce the pressure area of a large area layer by layer, and finally concentrated to a small enough point. The formula for calculating the pressure was P equals pGh. P is the pressure, P is the density of the liquid, where the density of water is 1 times 10⁻³ kg per m⁻³. According to the different sea areas, the density of the seawater will increase on this basis. G is the acceleration of gravity, 9.8 n/kg, and h is the height from the pressure point to the liquid surface. Using this, the water pressure of different depths can be calculated. If calculated using the method of atmospheric pressure, every increase of water depth by 10 meters would increase the pressure by about 1 atmosphere, which was 1.03323 kilograms/ordinary centimeter. The surface area of the human body was about 2 square meters. Based on the calculation of atmospheric pressure, it was 2 m⁻² by 100 kilopascals is equal to 2 times 10⁻⁵ n, which was about 15 tons of pressure in atmospheric pressure. But why did the human body feel nothing? Because the human body is filled with body fluids, cell fluid, blood, and lymph. Fluids conduct pressure to all parts of the body, forming a precise pressure conduction system that balances the internal and external pressure of the human body. This was also the reason why deep-sea fishes could withstand the enormous pressure. Therefore, when the deep-sea fish were fished into the shallow sea, they would die because of the disorder of the pressure balance system. Atlantis had also evolved a set of internal pressure balancing hydraulic system, strengthening the body's ability to withstand and adjust pressure. Their ability to adjust pressure was unparalleled. They could adjust their body functions in the rapidly changing water pressure and quickly change their deep diving state without any discomfort. Based on the research on the body fluid pressure regulation system that their body had evolved, the Atlanteans had combined it with the principle of the hydraulic press to create a set of simulated hydraulic system, or rather, a hydraulic press exoskeleton, created with controllable water molecules. This set of exoskeletons controlled water molecules to create a pressure conduction system around the body. It conducted the water pressure layer by layer and then applied it to the body. The body was under huge pressure, but it changed the body's hydraulic system to balance the pressure in the body. It was like the human body was living in 15 tons of atmospheric pressure without feeling anything. Then, through the human body's pressure system, the structure of a hydraulic press was formed in the human body. The huge pressure that the body was under was transmitted out when it attacked, turning the body into a part of the hydraulic press. Every punch and kick had 1,000,000 tons of pressure. Although this set of martial arts could also be used in the atmosphere by using the atmospheric pressure, its power would be greatly reduced. It could only be used effectively in the water. Therefore, the Atlanteans thought that it was too weak and could not deal with the disaster of apocalypse. Therefore, they did not continue to study it. However, because the Atlanteans' living environment was underwater, it was quite convenient to use this martial art. Every Atlantean had learned it. Namo had even practiced it to a relatively high level, almost reaching the theoretical upper limit of 10 billion tons of water pressure. A punch could produce 10 billion tons of water pressure. This set of martial arts had extremely harsh requirements for the environment. Even if it was practiced to the highest level, it could only be used in the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. Moreover, the auxiliary water control equipment could cover almost the entire Arctic Ocean. In other words, he needed to control so much seawater in the Arctic Ocean and construct a huge water pressure exoskeleton at the deepest part of the Mariana Trench to be able to produce 10 billion tons of water pressure with a punch. If it was only 1 meter below sea level, Namo could only produce a few tons of water pressure at most. However, if it was 20 meters underwater, the value would reach tens of thousands of tons. The capital of Atlantis was located 200 meters underwater. Namo held Poseidon's trident. The disturbed water control technology no longer pursued precision and perfect manipulation of seawater to form a huge volume. Instead, it was mechanized and modular. With Namo as the center and the trident as the core, it formed a set of water structure exoskeleton that stuck closely to Namo's body. The nature of millions of tons of seawater was changed, forming lines that could conduct pressure. These conductive water lines were woven around Namo to form a huge mechanical structure. Mu noticed this structure through the Poseidon's trident in his hand. In his eyes, Namo was wrapped in a huge spherical shadow. However, what he could not see was that the pressure on the spherical surface was subtly transferred to Namo's body. His body fluid balance system used this huge pressure to change the structure of his body. At this moment, the veins on Namo's face were bulging, and the muscles all over his body were bulging. Every inch of his body was under amazing pressure. He had to connect with this pressure and become a part of it, just like the seawater in the deep sea. He had to become a part of the pressure of the seawater and not bear it. Otherwise, even if he was made of adamantium, he would still be hammered flat. The powerful body of Atlantis was barely able to support this change. Namo seemed to have gone crazy. He was in a horse stance in the water. His face was red, his muscles were overloaded, and the density of his body fluid increased greatly. If he encountered Atlantis' imaginary enemy, Chun-Ong, he only needed to point a finger at Chun-Ong to destroy the water pressure conduction system. When Namo was pressurized, he would suddenly lose the external pressure and explode like a balloon. His whole body would explode into molecules, ensuring that the explosion would spread evenly over half of the Pacific Ocean. Therefore, it was not without reason that Atlantis gave up on this set of martial art. But did everyone present not have this scientific knowledge? Perhaps Batman did. He was collecting data on Namo and seemed to have discovered some deep secret. He began to urgently formulate a plan for the Flash to execute at the most critical moment. However, Arthur and his brother were at a loss. They had no idea what was happening. Finally, the pressure in Namo's body was balanced. Although AMU instinctively sensed that Namo was doing something disadvantageous to the situation, he did not know how to stop it. Was he going to use Poseidon's trident to disrupt the huge mechanical structure that Namo controlled? When the Atlanteans designed this water pressure conduction structure, they had already calculated the amount of anti-interference. Otherwise, if both Atlanteans used this martial arts, wouldn't it be fine if both of them interfered with each other's water control technology? Therefore, this structure had a very strong interference ability. It was a kind of dynamic balance. If a part was destroyed, the other parts could still play a role. At the same time, it would constantly repair and expand its size, achieving a dynamic balance with the speed at which it was destroyed. Moreover, the degree of interference that Poseidon's trident had on water control technology was much lower than the extent of the Atlantean civil war. When Poseidon's trident adopted a fixed structure and strengthened its shielding ability, Poseidon's trident had no ability to interfere at all. Although Namo maintained his balance under the heavy pressure, his appearance was extremely frightening. It was a completely different style. His muscles were like steel wires wrapped around his body. His entire body swelled to the height of two people. He was so strong that he looked like a monster. He had sharp edges and a resolute face. His evil aura was awe-inspiring. People could not help but suspect that he would roar at any time. F***ck your mother! Or you would already be dead. This was Chun Gu's venom. It had been carried forward by Chun Adam. The Atlantean scientists could not help but be influenced by the martial arts concepts of the two men. You two losers actually dared to challenge my ocean master, Namo. Namo's tone changed. The muscles on his face twitched as he smiled viciously. Do you think your death is not tragic enough? I, Namo, only need to move my biceps to make you guys explode. Die a horrible death, Namo roared. He lifted the trident and waved it casually. A water pressure weighing 100 million tons gushed out along with an unparalleled force. He used his huge water molecular exoskeleton as the root of his power. The trident in his hand was struck out like lightning under the unparalleled pressure. The speed was so fast that the friction between the trident and the seawater instantly evaporated the seawater in front of the trident, creating a whirlpool-like bubble. The evaporated water vapor expanded and created a tunnel filled with air. Namo waved his trident along the steam tunnel, avoiding the huge force of the seawater, and slashed at the deep-sea giant beast, Carson. In the face of such a huge pressure, the huge shell that was comparable to alloy steel was no better than a piece of paper. Namor felt as though he had smashed into a pile of rotten meat. The huge force instantly smashed Carson into two. Carson's entire body exploded into a pile of meat paste in the seawater. Carson! Yasin cried out in pain. Don't worry. You two will be next. Namo turned around and laughed wildly. Two little bugs, I can pinch you to death with just a little force. Why did I leave your bodies behind? You're making things difficult for me. 10 billion tons of water pressure. Extremely domineering. Namor roared. This time, he did not use his trident. Instead, he threw a punch at Amu. Amu could only use Poseidon's trident to block Namor's punch. However, Namor's fist easily broke the trident and continued to hammer Amu's chest. Amu! Arthur shouted again. Amu's chest had a hole the size of a human head. It had been punched through. It was obvious that Namo had tried his best to control his body. Namo laughed arrogantly. He was satisfied to see Arthur in pain. He stopped and was ready to enjoy the death of the two brothers. Batman finally saw through Namo's weakness. He made a plan to let the Flash go to Atlantis and save Sea King Arthur first. He already had a way to defeat Namo. Amu, my brother! Arthur hugged his brother and wept bitterly. He could see Amu's back through the big hole in Amu's chest. This kind of injury, only the Atlantean's body could still hold on to a breath. For Atlantis, Mu stuffed the two halves of Poseidon's trident into Arthur's hands. Arthur picked up his brother's broken trident. He watched his only relative die in his arms. Arthur raised his head and roared. His hands that were holding the two tridents had turned white. He looked back at Nemo. The anger in his eyes could burn the entire ocean. For Atlantis, the Sea King's wrath allowed him to use 120% of his strength as he waved his trident at Nemo. However, this little bit of power was nothing to Nemo. He just waved his trident lightly and broke the two tridents in Arthur's hands. It pierced through his chest and through Arthur's heart. At this moment, the entire ocean was silent. All the Atlanteans watched in silence as the last descendant of the Atlanteans died. At this moment, a red flash of lightning streaked across the ocean. Barry looked at this scene in horror. He had come too late. The flash had come too late. This was really ironic. However, Arthur was already dead. He was like a warrior, fighting with his eyes wide open. Chapter 12:10. On the watchtower, the atmosphere was stagnant. All the heroes of the Justice League had arrived. Barry had a look of self-blame on his face. He could still remember when he arrived. He was just a split second away. That split second was enough for the Flash to circle the Earth twice, but he couldn't make it in time. He could have saved everything if he was fast enough, but this time, for some reason, he wasn't so fast. He could only watch as Arthur died. Namor let him take away Arthur and Amu's bodies. He also saw Mela's desperate and pained eyes. Siren even returned to the watchtower with Barry to send Arthur off. Arthur lay among the flowers. His face was the same as when he was alive, but a little pale. Superman sat beside Arthur, looking at his comrade sadly. Steel Bones buried his head between his arms, unwilling to raise his head for a long time. Diana suppressed her emotions, afraid that she wouldn't be able to hold back and tear Batman apart. First Shazam, then the Eagle Man and Eagle Girl, and now Arthur. How long are we going to wait? How many comrades are going to die just like that? Diana couldn't help but explode in the end. She said angrily to Batman, "You always look like you're hiding secrets in your heart. I know you have your own plans. Now you just need to tell me. How many more people will die? Will that be enough?" Batman said hoarsely, "Diana, this isn't what I want to see either. I know who you're afraid of. You're afraid of the second prophet, but we already know the enemy. Why don't we fight him head-on?" Diana tied the lasso of truth, took the Godslayer and the shield, and was ready to fight to the death. She said to Batman, "Since we know where the enemy is, let's kill our way over. Kill our way to the World Security Council. I think you should have figured out where they are, right?" Batman said in a low voice, "Diana, we can't do this. What are you waiting for? No matter how powerful the enemy is, don't you even have the courage to fight? Because there's no hope in this world other than us." Batman said, "It's not that I don't have the courage, but we carry this world on our back. We have a huge responsibility, and this responsibility makes us cautious, even if we have to sacrifice ourselves. I'm about to solve the mystery, Diana, but we have to first deal with the enemy he created for us before we can come to him and fight one last time. Our world is about to end." Batman glanced at the report in his hand. "There are still 3 months. I must find the last few pieces of the puzzle and solve that person's plan in the time that Arthur and the others have bought with their lives." "How many more pieces of the puzzle do you need?" Diana asked softly. "There aren't many pieces left," Batman said sadly. "What I'm afraid of is, what if I can't find a way to save our world even after I solve all the puzzles?" "You're Batman. Batman always has a way." Superman appeared behind Batman and pressed on his shoulder as he spoke softly. "Go check on Barry." Superman sighed. "He is blaming himself." Only then did everyone turn their attention to Barry. Sure enough, Barry was sitting on a chair, hugging himself in a daze. At this moment, Steel Bones suddenly frowned. He said to the other members of the Alliance of Justice, Guys, Quinn is contacting us. He doesn't seem to be in good condition. Steel Bones transferred Quinn's signal to the big screen in the watchtower. Green Arrow, who was preparing to attend Arthur's funeral in Star City, didn't look too good. Green Arrow was pierced in the chest by an arrow and nailed to the huge giant star sculpture on the famous Star Bridge in Star City. On the top of another suspension tower opposite him, an archer also holding a bow and arrow looked up at the satellite above his head. This was a photo taken by the Satellite of the Sky Eye Association, and Steel Bones urgently mobilized the cameras in Star City. All of Star City seemed to be in an uproar because of this battle, and there were even TV helicopters rushing over to broadcast it. According to the pictures taken by the cameras scattered in various locations in Star City, this was a premeditated attack. The attacker nailed an arrow to the hood of Oliver's car when he was about to drive to the Star City Bridge, and issued a warning. Then, the two men engaged in a confrontation on the Star City Bridge. In the end, Oliver was defeated by the mysterious enemy and was pierced through the chest by an arrow, nailing him to the highest point of the bridge. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. In the current surveillance footage of the bridge, Oliver seemed to still be breathing. He kept coughing and spitting out pink blood with bubbles. Any hero in the Justice Alliance with a little bit of medical knowledge could tell that this was a sign that his lungs had been pierced. But at least it wasn't a direct hit to the heart, and there was still a chance of saving him. The Flash disappeared without a reminder. Oliver's chest was rising and falling weaker. His own weight under the effect of gravity was constantly damaging his lungs. He couldn't hold on for much longer. The mysterious person who hurt Green Arrow made a throat-slitting gesture at the camera and disappeared. Everyone thought that the Flash would appear soon, but it took a long minute. In the end, Oliver stopped breathing for a full 30 seconds before a red bolt of lightning took him down. The next second, the Flash brought Oliver back to the Alliance of Justice's infirmary. The paramedics who had been waiting here hurried to perform CPR on Green Arrow. But Barry still broke down. He scratched his head and said, "I can't make it. I'm always late. I'm late every time. I could have saved them. I was too late when the Eagle Man died. When Arthur died, it was because I was too late. Oliver died because I was too late." All the members of the Alliance of Justice looked at the broken Barry. They didn't know how to comfort him. Batman's reaction was cold. He knew that the enemy had not only killed Green Arrow, but also Barry. They had defeated two heroes at once. Shazam had died of naivety. He had been plotted against. His strongest power came from Wizard Shazam, so Wizard Shazam was also killed. The Eagle Man and Eagle Girl died of cursed love. The Eagle Man's strongest power was his pride and will. The Eagle Man was the proudest superhero. So he died of betrayal because of love. His pride and will were crushed. The arrogant eagle was smashed into the mud. Sea King Arthur died in the sea. His strongest power came from the sea, from Atlantis. However, his weakness was also Atlantis. He shouldered the responsibility of a country. So he died in the sea because of Atlantis. He died in the hands of another king of Atlantis. Green Arrow's strongest point was his archery. His weakness? Fine. He was his weakness. He couldn't beat any slightly stronger enemy. So he was killed by an arrow. The Flash's weakness was that he was too kind. His strength was in his speed. So the enemy made his speed useless. They made the fastest hero always a step too late. Then, they used the Flash's kind heart to make him blame himself and crush his spirit. The Flash was already dead. If they forced him to go on a mission, he would go crazy. Moreover, Batman couldn't figure out why the Flash was always one step behind, and there was no way for him to save him. The Flash's kindness and sense of responsibility made him save one friend after another. He was a hero, but he was too late again and again. This was where the mastermind wanted to defeat him. He wanted the Flash to blame himself again and again. He wanted everyone in the Justice Alliance to see how he tortured the conscience of the Justice Alliance of Justice Alliance. Next, they would defeat the heroes at their strongest point again and again, severely injuring the heroes' weaknesses. They tortured the conscience of the Justice Alliance, crushed the soul of the Justice Alliance, fooled the brains of the Justice Alliance, and destroyed everything that the Justice Alliance was proud of. Batman told Superman and Wonder Woman his analysis. They might be the next target. As for the others, Batman believed that the mastermind would not bother to deal with other small fries. The only ones worthy of another attack were the 3 leaders of the Justice Alliance. After everyone saw off Arthur,